lovers, or innocent victims. On April 7, 2024, the Mrs. Buryatia beauty pageant was held in Ulan-Ude, Republic of Buryatia, Russia. Seseg Buinova, a 30-year-old mother of 2 children, received the nomination Mrs. Top Model in it. Instantly famous throughout the country, the woman also quickly disappeared from view. Literally. 4 days later, the finalist went missing, and for 4 months, nothing has been heard from her. Investigators, relatives, and just concerned citizens have been knocked down in their attempts to find the missing woman. However, the further the investigation progresses, the more questions arise. Mysterious disappearance has given rise to many versions and creepy speculations. Today, together with you, we'll try to touch the mysteries of the investigation and figure out where the beauty queen of Eastern Siberia disappeared. Mysterious disappearance. April 11th, Seseg called her husband Boris, who was on a business trip, and asked to send money for groceries. After that, she informed him that she would be doing household chores. Her husband was convinced that this would be the case, but the woman decided otherwise. That evening, she decided to earn some money on her own. From time to time, Seseg moonlighted as a cab driver in her Mitsubishi Outlander. Despite the numerous earnings, the money was still not enough. Her spouse did not like this way of earning money, especially when she was taxiing at late hours. However, the wife assured that everything was fine and she was in no danger. At 8 p.m., Seseg left the house, and an hour and a half later she was free. At around 10 p.m., the young woman met with her friends to have coffee together. After a short conversation, the acquaintances went home. Seseg Buinova said she would also go home to her children. She called the boys and warned them that she would be there soon. However, her words did not come true. Instead, the woman drove up to the Absolute shopping center, where a young man got into her car. CCTV cameras recorded that the two stayed in the car for about an hour. A time later, a third man joined them. The car then drove out of the parking lot toward the 100th block. After that, Seseg did not return home. Moreover, later it became known that a certain Stanislav Norboev disappeared with her. Beautiful Seseg. Darmayeva Seseg Balzinimayevna was born on July 8, 1993 in the small village of Tashir, Selenginsky district, Republic of Buryatia. There is little information about her early age. However, one thing is indisputable. The girl grew up very active. She loved to dance and do sports, especially singled out volleyball. It was this sport that instilled in her iron discipline and the will to win. Having received secondary education, the girl moved to the capital, where she entered the Buryat State University. In 2015, she successfully graduated from the educational institution. After, the enterprising person registered as an individual entrepreneur and became a specialist in eyelash extensions. To this day, on the expanses of the internet, there are still ads in which she advertises her services and invites to the procedure. Having studied the profitable directions in business, in December 2022, Seseg opened a children's clothing store, and in her spare time, she started moonlighting as a private carriage driver. As for her personal life, everything is as transparent as possible. Seseg shared important moments in social networks. Even during her student years, Darmayeva married and became Buinova. The marriage gave birth to 2 beautiful boys, Kirill and Alexander. In 2024, the children turned 9 and 8 years old, respectively. The young woman was a wonderful mother. She brought up her children in love and care. Her husband Boris did not often glimpsed in joint photos, perhaps because he did not like to be photographed. According to the latest information, he worked in the organization for catching stray dogs. He was a former law enforcement officer. Many people speak favorably of him. He loved his creative wife and supported in everything. They even say that the couple never quarreled. At least, no one saw it. In her posts, Buinova talked about visiting Moscow, St. Petersburg, Turkey, Thailand, and Cuba, supporting the information with colorful photos. The young woman liked to dress stylishly, take care of herself, go to the gym, and have fun. She was often seen in local restaurants, clubs, and karaoke bars. At the same time, she behaved with dignity. She just liked the beautiful life and social gloss. Buinova knew how to present herself, always wore fashionable clothes, beautiful makeup, often arranged professional photo shoots. Mrs. Top Model. One day, a young woman decided to take part in a national beauty contest. Having easily passed the qualifying stage, Seseg found herself among the contestants. During the 2-month preparation, she shared everything in her account, covering, so to speak, behind-the-scenes secrets, master classes, trainings, and so on. Finally, on April 7th, the final of the contest took place. On the stage, the contestant tried to show herself and her talent as much as possible. She even fulfilled a childhood dream by singing in front of a large audience. "I am my family, my husband and my children, my relatives who are always near and support me in all endeavors. I rejoice in life, every new day, and believe that each of us should be happy and fill this life with bright emotions. For me, happiness is my family. Every day, they give me new emotions, smiles, their love and warmth," Seseg confessed during her performance. According to the results of the contest, the jury unanimously awarded her the title Mrs. Top Model. Seseg expected that participation in such an event would be the beginning of her path in the modeling business. However, a few days later, she disappeared without a trace. During this time, the flowers given at the event did not even have time to wilt. First clues. The news of the beauty queen's disappearance spread quickly. The first to sound the alarm was her husband, who at that time was in Khabarovsk. On April 12th, he threw Seseg a few photos from the trip, but she did not respond. During the day, he did not hear from her. After that, he called his mother-in-law and asked her to go to their house. The village of Gorky was located on the outskirts of Ulan-Ude. As it turned out, the children were left alone, and Seseg had not been there since yesterday evening. Having heard the bad news, Oris immediately flew to Irkutsk, from where he left by car. On the morning of April 14th, he was already there. By that time, Seseg's relatives reported to the police. Law enforcement officers did not hesitate and quickly organized a search operation. They were joined by volunteers from the specialized search and rescue team, Liza Alert. On the evening of April 12th, Buinova was posted on social networks. While specialists were busy establishing the route of the missing woman, leaflets were distributed all over the city and information was collected. In total, more than 500 people were involved. Many places were combed. Vakmistrovo, Medvedchikovo settlement, 100th micro-districts, forests, and riverbanks. However, the first clues were found on the territory of the industrial zone. Exploring the area around, volunteers noticed a mattress, and under it men's and women's belongings. Bloodstains were visible on the grass next to them. Specifically, they found a woman's black tights, a man's and woman's jacket, a t-shirt, men's underwear, and a gym bag. In the pocket of the man's jacket were keys to a Nissan car and keys to an apartment, as well as a driver's license in the name of 26-year-old Stanislav Norboev. It is noteworthy that at that time the people who found his personal belongings did not know that he had disappeared together with Seseg. None of his relatives suspected it, so Nadezhda Boldanova, Stanislav's sister, learned the terrible news about her brother. Stanislav Norboev. When the name of the young man unexpectedly surfaced in the investigation, Stanislav's mother was shocked. She said that she saw her son on the evening of April 11th. He stopped by her house to have dinner. After that, he received a phone call and left. The guy did not say who called, but he was in an upbeat mood. He said that he would go to his apartment and get some sleep. Stas's mother noted that he initially came in work clothes. However, he soon changed his clothes and hurried away. He studied well, was cheerful. He graduated from the construction faculty of the East Siberian State University of Technology and Management. He was fond of soccer, served in the army, worked by profession in the road department. "My son has always been my support," Nina Norboeva said about him. People close to him characterized him as a calm and judicious person who led a healthy lifestyle and practiced sports. He had an extensive circle of friends. In early April of this year, Stanislav moved out from his mother to a rented apartment in the 100th block. The young man justified his decision by the fact that he wanted to build a new relationship and create a family. Otherwise, He did not tell anyone about his personal life. Points of contact. It soon became clear that Stanislav Norboev and Seseg Buinova did not meet by chance. Something linked the young people, but what exactly it was is not known. Relatives of the missing decided to find out how they were connected to each other. There are two versions of the story. Ekaterina, a friend of Seseg, said that they met about a week ago in a nightclub. Before the institution closed, the man invited Seseg, who liked him, to a slow dance. After he found Seseg Buinova in social networks and started flooding her with messages, Seseg confessed to her friend that she did not exchange contacts with him. However, Stanislav was stubborn and insisted on communication. In her interview, Catherine was perplexed. He knew that she was a married woman and had children. His behavior was alarming. Moreover, later it turned out that Seseg was not the only one to whom he wrote. Other women were also found. Relatives and acquaintances hastened to dispel all doubts about Stanislav. They made an official statement that Norboev is a good man who is not capable of kidnapping and even worse. At the same time, another close friend claimed that Seseg and Stanislav had met much earlier. Allegedly, they often crossed paths at training sessions as they both loved volleyball. From here comes another equally popular version that between them did arise romantic feelings, about which Boris soon learned. Allegedly, Seseg's husband could not survive the treason and decided to teach the unfaithful wife a lesson. Perhaps something did not go according to plan, so instead of scaring the lovers, he killed them. Either it was originally about ruthless revenge. This theory is explained by other facts, which you will learn later. However, perhaps this is why the investigation does not trust Boris and considers him the main suspect. In his interview, the man shared that the investigative committee does not want to work with him. They do not give me any information, not even regarding the conducted examinations. Nothing. For example, they found some earring. But at the same time did not notify me, did not invite me to the identification, complained Buinova. Also, the husband of the beauty queen reported that they seized the video from his phone. According to him, if he was really involved in the case, he was already definitely sitting behind bars. Who accuses me? It's their right, their understatement, he stated. The relatives of the missing woman say with one voice that they do not believe Boris is guilty. They rely on the fact that they had a lot of plans for the future. The couple was making repairs and dreamed of a third child, a girl. It must be said that as soon as Boris returned home, he immediately began an independent search. Familiar family members are sure that Boris is trying to vilify. Another find. Along with the things on the vacant lot in the grass were also found bloodstains. Later, it turned out that they belonged to Stanislav Norboev. A few days after the investigation began, Seseg's car was found. It was parked with twisted license plates in one of the yards. The resident of the apartment building number 60 on Stolbovaya Street reported about the strange car, similar in description to the one flashed on all news channels. It was not the first day that the woman had been watching him through the window. During all this time, the owner has not shown up. Buinova, who arrived on the spot, recognized his wife's car. However, it was empty. After inspection in the cabin were found sand, dust, and a small branch, as if the car had been in nature, for example, on a vacant lot. On the windows of the Mitsubishi and the driver's door from the inside, there were visible traces of blood, and in the trunk, there were removed license plates. After conducting a genetic examination, experts stated that the blood found belonged to none other than Seseg. Unfortunately, it was not possible to establish when exactly the vehicle was there. Therefore, the testimony of an eyewitness was taken as a basis. A picture of what happened. After the specialist studied the recordings from the video surveillance cameras, the picture of what happened began to emerge. At 08:52 p.m., according to the cab service, Seseg finished the last order on the route Barnaulskaya-Armavirskaya. At 08:57 p.m., she called her friend and proposed to meet. The women agreed to see each other near the Krona Flower Salon on Baltakanova Street. There, they got in touch with another friend and stopped by the cafe. After a friendly conversation, everyone went away. However, instead of heading home at 10:41 p.m., Buinova drove up to a shopping center located at 158 Babushkina Street. 4 minutes later, Stanislav Norboev drove up to her. After that, the man moved into a black Mitsubishi, in which the young people stayed for about an hour. Then another man appeared out of nowhere. He joined them, and they drove off in an unknown direction. At 12:19 at night, street cameras recorded the Mitsubishi at the intersection of Babushkina and Rinchino streets. The vehicle was moving towards Domostroitelnaya Street. Further, their trail disappeared. In addition, the investigators managed to establish something else. At 12:44 a.m., Seseg visited her telegram for the last time, and an hour later, her car was speeding back at breakneck speed. On April 12th at 6:28 a.m., Buinova's cell phone was fixed at 5 Sakyanova Street. This address is not far from where Seseg's Mitsubishi was later found. New information. As new leads emerged, the possibility of finding the missing alive was melting before our eyes. But the main mystery, perhaps, is the identity of the third person who got into the car. Investigators are in no hurry to name him, but there are reports that he previously worked in the police. This version arose after the guards of the industrial area where the things were found earlier shed light on the ill-fated night. The drivers of passing trains noticed that around 1 a.m. there was a car in the vacant lot, and they saw a man near the railroad tracks. For safety reasons, they reported the matter to their superiors. Several guards then went to the location to investigate the situation. A man wearing a cap was driving the car. The men arrived and asked him what he was doing here. The latter replied that the car had stalled. He then showed his police identification card. When the guards decided to check the surrounding area, the car suddenly started and drove away. They later identified the vehicle in which the unknown man was sitting. It was Buinova's car. Unfortunately, they could not remember the appearance and the data given in the ID card. Employees of the industrial zone referred to the dark time of day and poor visibility. The fact that the mystery passenger was not simple was indicated by many things, including the place where the car was located. It turns out that he was standing in the blind spot from the nearest CCTV cameras. After a while, the popular show Malakoff on the television channel took up the investigation of the case. In the course of it sounded different versions of what happened. In the studio were present relatives of the missing and experts. However, the most important were unique footage from CCTV cameras, which were shown for the first time. They show how a car, similar to Seseg's car, drives into the vacant lot and stops. Then several people get out of it. Some movements resembling a fight begin. One of them falls down, the other pulls something large and long away from the car. Then, the man who was pulling something gets back into the car and drives away. However, 45 minutes later, he returns again. As time passed, 2 unknown men approached him, and then the headlights went out and the picture disappeared. Perhaps the released video will give a new twist to the tangled case, and there will be positive developments in it. Among other things, there are plenty of oddities in the disappearance of Seseg and Stanislav. On the night of April 11, 12, not far from where the evidence was found, outbuildings were burning. Some people believe it was not accidental. Someone intentionally committed arson to destroy all traces. In addition, the next day, unknown persons poured concrete on the place where Buinova's Mitsubishi with 3 passengers was supposedly located. One thing is clear. The case is covered with mystery, and someone deliberately prevents its disclosure. Why did the search stop? By April 17th, hundreds of volunteers combed Domostroitelnaya Street and the entire industrial zone, abandoned buildings, ravines and woodlands, hills and wastelands. Conducting searches in the water area of the river turned out to be problematic, as at that time the ice drift began. However, as much as possible, the search operation was carried out. At that moment, more than 2,000 leaflets were distributed all over Ulan-Ude. A huge number of people were questioned. However, as soon as concerned citizens from other regions started heading to the city, the search group, Liza Alert, announced the suspension of its activities. In their post on the social network, the leadership explained that their headquarters had done a tremendous amount of work in 5 days. "We do not finish our work," the text read. "The search for Seseg and Stanislav continues. We are waiting for new evidence, ready to process it, and go on autonomous tasks. During this time, several other items have been found in the investigation area that could conceivably belong to Seseg. Among them, women's boots, an e-cigarette, and a hat. However, at the moment of the finds, only a man's jacket with documents and keys have been officially confirmed. Apparently, the other things have nothing to do with the case or information about them is not disclosed. Volunteers noted that there is a lot of garbage and miscellaneous junk on the vacant lot, which makes the inspection much more difficult. The search for Seseg Buinova and Stanislav Norboev continues to this day, but by relatives. The relatives of the missing have joined their efforts, despite the suspicions that have arisen about Stanislav. Families and their acquaintances take to the streets after working hours and on weekends. There are about 10 of us. Strangers are calling, interested in the results, worried, offering help. Now law enforcers, family, and friends are doing it. Of course, we would like to once again gather volunteers and walk the place. The children are waiting for their mom. They don't know what happened. So far, we have told them that mom has left. Shared Svetlana Mitipova, Seseg's aunt. Nina Norboeva said that she feels that her son is alive. The woman stated that she would believe it until she was convinced otherwise. The silence was interrupted. It is striking that after the public outcry, there is a sharp silence. People are perplexed and speculate why the Liza Alert Squad, after finding important leads, quickly called off the search, and afterward they closed comments to posts about Seseg, explaining it with ethical considerations. In the first week, hundreds of people dropped what they were doing and took to the streets in search of the missing. Understandably, they were extremely outraged and waited for some kind of explanation. Finally, on May 29th, the authorities broke the silence and made an official statement. They reported that murder is being considered as the main version. The suspect is the person who got into Seseg's car near the shopping center. Work is underway to improve the quality of the video footage to identify the person. Otherwise, investigative operative search and search activities continue in the criminal case. Evidence in the case. Thus, at this point in the case of Seseg and Stanislav's disappearance, there are the following official leads. First, the items found in the vacant lot: Norboev's jacket, keys, and driver's license. The second lead is other items, the identity of which is not known. The third clue is a large bloodstain found there. The fourth lead is a woman's car left in the yard with no license plates and bloodstains. The fifth clue is the CCTV footage, which shows the route of the Mitsubishi on the night of April 11th, 12. And finally, the sixth lead is the testimony of witnesses and eyewitnesses. Forensic and genomic tests are being conducted on the available evidence. No further information is available. Versions. The main theory is murder. The first person who comes to mind is Boris Buinov. He may well have been involved in the massacre, and the infidelity of his wife could be the motive for the crime. But this is just speculation. Seseg's relatives reported that they did not find any compromising correspondence in Seseg's computer. Boris admitted that he had been questioned by investigators more than once and passed a polygraph. At the same time, many circumstances raised doubts. First of all, Boris's work in law enforcement agencies in the past. We remember that the unknown man showed his service ID and could well be a former colleague of the suspect. Secondly, Buinov's strange business trip on the day of his wife's disappearance, 1,500 miles away. It is as if he took care of his alibi in advance. The second issue is the questionable nature of the trip itself regarding the capture of stray dogs, especially over such a long distance. Thirdly, Buinova's expensive automobile was not destroyed, and after all, it is a jointly acquired property, and in case of what it will always be able to dispose of the second spouse. The second version is kidnapping. Allegedly, Stanislav fell so much in love with a woman who did not reciprocate that he stole her. However, this raises many questions. Who was the third person in the car, and for what purpose? Is Seseg alive at this point, and if so, where is she? The next theory is a criminal showdown over debts. It is possible that at one time the woman sought financial help from people with a criminal lifestyle, perhaps to build a business or maybe in preparation for a beauty pageant. When the time came to pay off her debts, something went wrong. Hence, Seseg's desire to moonlight as a cab driver. Also, on the day she disappeared, she asked her husband for some money. Obviously, it was a small amount, but there is a possibility that she was collecting the necessary amount. That would explain Stanislav's presence in Buinova's car. Perhaps she did not tell Boris about her problems, but invited an athlete she knew to the meeting as a defense. In that case, killing them is illogical and rather wrong. It is important for the creditor to fulfill the debtor's obligations, even if overdue. The fourth version is the most banal, but it is quite possible. Seseg and Stanislav could have encountered an inadequate traveling companion, especially after the contest Mrs. Buryatia 2024, the woman was widely known. The criminal could have been her secret admirer who put his sick fantasy into practice. There is another version of events. What if the two lovers simply ran away, and to be forgotten in time, were forced to stage a crime? Although it is unlikely that the young people would go for such a thing. Seseg had children she would never abandon. Stanislav had a mother and a sister. There are few people willing to build their happiness on the misfortune of others, instead of the bottom line. As we can see, there are many versions of events. It is possible that over time, in the case of Buinova and Norboev, something will become clearer. However, it may also happen that we will never know what really happened. However, this investigation has brought us a little closer to solving a very strange disappearance. A psychological exhumation changed the outcome of the investigation 4 years later. A psychological profile is called a detailed examination and analysis of a person's personality, their character traits, behavioral peculiarities, emotional state, intellect, self-esteem, and the motivations behind their actions. To compile such a profile, experts typically resort to methods such as interviews, various psychological tests, observations, situational modeling, and even analysis of social media pages. But what if the person has long passed away and you need to create their psychological profile and assess their emotional state shortly before death? The case of Kristen Trickle is quite complex and, one might say, unique in its kind. It is referred to as the first instance of psychological exhumation in forensic history, conducted to uncover the motivations and thought processes of a young woman who suddenly decided to settle accounts with life. No one believed that the joyful, devout Kristen, who had big plans for the future, would suddenly end everything without any apparent reason. The forensic pathologist's conclusion supported the main theory, but an experienced psychologist managed to uncover the truth. The main problem was the time that had passed since the tragedy. Years had gone by, but eventually, this did not prevent the conviction of the criminal, who was sure he had gotten away with it. The love story of Kristen and Colby Trickle. Kristen Trickle, née Reese, was born on August 14, 1993, in a small town in southeastern Nebraska. Her childhood can hardly be described as carefree and untroubled. Her biological mother left the family when the little girl was not even 3 years old. The woman abandoned her husband and child for another man, moved to California, and never again showed interest in her daughter's fate. Kristen's father, James, raised his daughter on his own, doing everything possible to ensure she lacked for nothing. However, the man suffered from a severe illness that progressively worsened, and when Kristen turned 16, her father passed away. Since there were no other close relatives, she could have been sent to a shelter until she came of age. At this time, an aunt and uncle on her father's side, who lived in the neighboring state of Kansas, stepped in. Although the couple was raising 3 children of their own, they expressed a willingness to take in their orphaned niece and do everything possible to ensure her comfortable and happy life. Soon, the young girl moved into her relative's home. In her new family, Kristen never felt like an outsider. On the contrary, her aunt and uncle treated her just as they did their own children, surrounding her with love and care. Kristen herself did well in school, attended art studio classes, helped her family with household tasks, and dreamed of becoming a veterinary doctor because she loved animals dearly. Relatives and friends described her as responsive, kind, friendly, and very sweet. She never despaired, confidently pursued her goals, and energized everyone around her with her optimism. The Rice family was religious, so they regularly attended church on Sundays, where 18-year-old Kristen met a young man named Colby. He was an aspiring musician, performing as part of a band that played music during sermons and services. He had also recently turned 18, was quite talented, and dreamed of building a successful music career in the future. The young people quickly formed a friendship, which soon turned into a romantic relationship. Colby was skilled on the guitar and wrote his own songs, which he dedicated to his beloved, capturing her heart. He was open, sociable, cheerful, easily made friends, and could easily be the life of any party. After finishing high school, the young man took a serious interest in military affairs and joined the Army. By the age of 18, he had signed several contracts and commenced his service in the U.S. Armed Forces. Over the next 3 years, he managed to build a decent military career. Meanwhile, he stayed in touch with Kristen, with whom he frequently called and corresponded. At the age of 21, Colby unexpectedly entered the reserves, returned home, and proposed to his sweetheart, who happily accepted. The couple married in April 2014. The newlyweds settled in a small town called Hays, in Kansas, where Colby finished college and pursued a music career, albeit not very successfully. He performed at small parties and local events, playing cover versions of well-known hits. The couple had 2 dogs, which they adored, and many considered their marriage quite happy. However, 5 years into their marriage, a terrible tragedy occurred: a grim Halloween Eve. On October 31st, 2019, around 4 a.m, a distressed call was made to the emergency services dispatch. The caller, a man who identified himself as Colby Trickle, reported that his wife, Kristen, had fired a bullet into her head from a revolver kept in their home. A medical team was promptly dispatched to the scene, along with a police patrol car that was nearby at the time. At the front door, they were met by a young man who allowed the officers inside but stayed outside himself. Trickle appeared relatively calm, given the severity of the situation. When the officers entered the bedroom, they found a woman lying on the bed in a pool of her own blood. A large revolver lay on her abdomen, and a gunshot wound was evident on her chin. It seemed she had already passed away, but unexpectedly, the victim moved her hand, and an officer found a weak pulse and breathing. Following this, Kristen was moved to the adjacent room to properly position her on the floor for resuscitation efforts. Unfortunately, despite all efforts, she had passed away by the time the ambulance arrived, and the medical team could only confirm her death. Sergeant Brandon Hautman went outside and informed Colby that his spouse had passed away. The young man asked repeatedly if the officer was sure about this, and upon receiving confirmation, he began to cry. His behavior and tears seemed insincere, as just minutes before Hautman's arrival, he had been casually talking with other patrollers about video games. At first glance, it appeared that the woman had indeed decided to end her life voluntarily, but upon examining the scene, experienced detectives immediately suspected foul play. It was Halloween Eve, and it seemed the deceased had been actively preparing for the celebration. On her bedroom's vanity lay handmade costume decorations she had prepared, and in the kitchen, themed treats for children were set out in bowls, including lollipop bats and ghosts, gummy worms, and more, an uncharacteristic way out. The chosen method of ending her life was very strange and untypical for a woman, as was the scene itself. First, the deceased was found nearly undressed, wearing only her underwear. Women generally want to look beautiful even in death, concerned about how they will be found. Secondly, a gunshot to the head is not a typically feminine method, again, due to concerns about disfiguring themselves. Kristen's face was so badly damaged that she had to be buried in a closed casket. The third and most significant oddity was the weapon itself. The revolver was too large and cumbersome for such a petite and fragile woman. It would have been uncomfortable for her to hold, and she could hardly have twisted her arm to shoot herself in the chin. Moreover, the position of the weapon puzzled the officer as it lay on the woman's stomach, pointing sideways. However, The deceased spouse explained that after realizing what had happened, he too had thought about ending his life, had held the revolver to his temple, but then abandoned the thought and decided to call emergency services in hopes of saving his beloved. While law enforcement continued their work at the scene, the woman's mobile phone lying on a nightstand unexpectedly rang with an alarm. It turned out the deceased had plans for the morning and had set the alarm not to be late, but she seemingly changed her mind during the night and decided to end her life. This looked highly suspicious, and detectives suspected they were dealing with a masterful staging. The widower, now the main suspect, was due for questioning, interrogation, and Colby's account. The man willingly agreed to go to the police station to give his statement. He appeared upset, but not devastated, behaving calmly and confidently. He explained that on that evening, his wife, Kristen, returned from her job at Walmart, where she was a manager expecting a promotion to senior manager. They had dinner together, played video games, and then Colby went to bed early because he was feeling unwell, while Kristen went to the kitchen to finish cleaning and setting out sweets for the holiday. In the middle of the night, Colby was awakened by a sudden, loud bang. For a few seconds, he was disoriented, his ears ringing, and he could see nothing in the darkness. Once he turned on the light, he found his wife lying motionless beside him, blood pouring from her head. He tried to revive her, but realizing it was futile, he grabbed the revolver, held it to his own head, but then set it back on her body, called emergency services, and went outside to meet the police. The sequence and nature of his actions raised many questions. For instance, why he placed the weapon on the woman's abdomen instead of throwing it on the floor, the bed, or leaving it on a nightstand. It was also unclear why he waited outside for the police and medics if he thought his wife might still be saved. Typically, in such situations, people attempt to perform life-saving measures or simply press something against the wound to stop the bleeding. The former serviceman did not approach his wife again, explaining that he was in shock. While a police officer was trying to provide first aid before the medics arrived, Colby did not come over or inquire about the situation. Instead, he casually talked outside with a patrol officer about music and video games. Upon learning that Kristen was no longer alive, he squeezed out a few tears but quickly regained his composure. At the station, Colby was asked the standard question about whether there was any life insurance on the deceased, to which he responded negatively, but added that he was entitled to some minor payouts from the armed forces where he had served. Incidentally, Trickle began boasting about his accomplishments, noting that he had served in intelligence and was involved in special operations around the world. His words sounded convincing, though it soon turned out that almost none of what he said was true. When asked why, in his opinion, his wife might have taken such a desperate step, he replied that she had suffered from prolonged depressions from an early age, which developed against the backdrop of all the events that happened to her in childhood and adolescence. He mentioned her mother's betrayal, her father's death, and her forced life in her uncle and aunt's home, whom Kristen did not even know before. The widower's words again sounded convincing, and he spoke confidently and calmly. Nonetheless, experienced investigators felt that this man was lying and possibly had premeditated what to say. However, at that moment, they had nothing to charge him with, as there were no concrete pieces of evidence against him, so Mr. Trickle had to be released. Kristen's family's perspective. When Kristen's uncle, aunt, and her siblings were informed of the tragedy, they immediately traveled to Hayes, nearly 500 miles from their city, to speak with the police and prepare for the funeral. Unanimously, they vehemently denied the possibility that she could have willingly ended her life, citing her deep religious faith, regular church attendance, and her belief that such an act was a sin. Additionally, according to her family, Kristen was a life-loving optimist with ambitious future plans. Specifically, she wanted to open a shelter for homeless animals and had even scoped out an available property with a large plot of land she intended to lease long-term for this purpose. These statements were soon verified, and detectives confirmed that she had been negotiating to rent the property. Moreover, She was anticipating a promotion at work, a position she was very proud of, was preparing her costume and candies for Halloween, and had promised to visit her sister for her birthday in mid-November. Her relatives also insisted that she had never suffered from depression, had no mental disorders or harmful habits. Another crucial point, they stressed, was that she would never recklessly abandon her beloved dogs. During discussions with the police, the uncle and aunt suggested that Colby might have coldly dealt with his wife, orchestrating it to appear as though she had voluntarily left this world. They described her husband as a cruel and domineering man who tried to control every aspect of her interactions, chose whom she could communicate with, and would fly into a rage if Kristen did not respond to his calls or messages immediately. He also forbade her from talking to her relatives, and she would call them secretly from her husband. Visits were rare. During her last visit, she confided that she could no longer tolerate such treatment, had talked with her husband about it, and if things did not change, they would have to separate. Autopsy results and forensic expert conclusions. Following conversations with both the widower and the deceased's relatives, detectives believed that the forensic examination would be decisive in the case. The examination revealed only one entry wound from a bullet, located on the chin. The shot had been fired while the woman was lying on her back, with the gun barrel pressed closely to her head. It was possible that she could have inflicted the wound herself, although it would have been extremely awkward for her to do so. There were no signs of struggle or resistance on Kristen's body. However, upon learning from relatives that Colby was a true tyrant with controlling behavior, the detectives insisted on an additional examination for any signs of bruises, abrasions, scratches, or other injuries in various stages of healing. They hypothesized that if the former serviceman had occasionally been violent towards his wife, there would inevitably be some traces. Yet the investigation was met with disappointment as no internal or external injuries were found, other than the gunshot wound. Pathological liar and a flawed family. The investigation continued to scrutinize Colby, examining his personality, and it was revealed that he was a pathological liar. He lied so frequently and convincingly that it seemed he began to believe his own fabrications. It started with the fact that he had never been in any hot spots, nor had any involvement with intelligence, despite having convinced everyone during the interrogation that he was telling the truth. The man lied to those around him about having a successful music career and high earnings. In reality, for the past several years, Kristen, who worked tirelessly, had been the main breadwinner for their family. Colby, on the other hand, scraped by with occasional gigs during holidays, spending the rest of his time playing video games. Despite his real talent, he lacked persistence, patience, and was hindered by his laziness. Furthermore, the police had a warrant to seize and examine gadgets owned by the couple, and this inspection yielded quite intriguing results. The deceased's phone calendar was packed with scheduled activities ranging from haircuts to meetings with a real estate agent. Meanwhile, Colby's messages revealed that he had been openly flirting with another woman, even exchanging messages while at the police station. On a laptop in the living room, a search history that had been deleted was recovered, showing that shortly before the tragedy, there were queries about the payout amount for a life insurance policy in the event of death. This last aspect particularly interested the authorities. Checks revealed that Colby had lied again. 2 insurance policies had been taken out on his wife, with him as the beneficiary in the event of her death. These included military spouse insurance, as well as a standard life insurance policy. The amounts involved were far from trivial, contrary to what the man had claimed. He had even calculated exactly what payouts he would be entitled to, the fortunate widower. Despite numerous inconsistencies in the case, direct allegations from the deceased's relatives against Colby, and the existence of a clear motive for him, the decision ultimately hinged on the forensic expert's report. The document stated that there were no signs of violence on the body except for a single gunshot wound, suggesting that it was highly likely that the deceased had voluntarily ended her life. The case was closed and archived. By that time, the widower had already received the payouts due to him. From a special insurance for U.S. Armed Forces spouses, he received nearly $50,000, and from the life insurance policy, over $100,000. On the very day the money was deposited into his account, he ordered a life-sized realistic doll for intimate pleasures from an online store. He also purchased a new gaming console, an electric guitar, and expensive musical equipment, and began spending the rest on clothes and entertainment nearly every evening in bars and restaurants. Colby was enjoying life, sparing no expense for himself, and genuinely believed that the story was over, with no evidence against him and thus no potential charges. He lived happily for about 2 years until a pivotal event occurred: a new prosecutor and the suspect's arrest. In the summer of 2021, a new district prosecutor was appointed, to whom the detectives handling the Trickle case appealed for help. They requested permission to reopen the investigation, asserting they had little doubt that the widower had eliminated his wife, making it appear as though she had voluntarily departed from life. As proof, they presented all the peculiarities and discrepancies, pointed to the restored browser history, and highlighted the suspect's very unusual behavior and his clear motive. After reviewing the case materials, the prosecutor authorized the reopening of the case, and in July 2021, Trickle was finally taken into custody. He was charged with first-degree premeditated homicide and intentionally misleading the investigation. During his arrest, he remained calm and immediately contacted his lawyers, who began working on his defense right away. Colby's defense relied on the forensic pathologist's findings and argued that Kristen had suffered from chronic depression for many years, and her tragic departure was only a matter of time. Meanwhile, his lawyers tried to portray their client as a loving and caring husband, a valorous serviceman, and a devout person. Psychological autopsy. The investigation could have hit a dead end, as it relied heavily on the same medical conclusion. Thus, the prosecution took an unprecedented step by bringing in experienced specialists to create a psychological profile of the deceased and analyze her emotional state just before the tragedy. This unusual method was termed a psychological autopsy or psychological exhumation. The psychiatrist conducted extensive work, analyzing data from Kristen's mobile phone, her social media posts, her most recent photos, and also by interviewing her relatives, friends, and colleagues. Gathering and analyzing the information took months, but the expert's conclusion was clear. Kristen could not have intended to end her life, given her short-term and long-term plans. Trial and verdict. The legal proceedings in this complex case began only in September 2023, nearly 4 years after the tragedy. The defendant had a clear motive, behaved suspiciously, and consistently lied during interrogations, but the forensic expert's conclusion initially worked in his favor. However, the prosecution now had another report that could potentially turn the case around. When Colby was questioned about the insurance inquiries on his computer, he claimed they were probably made by his wife wanting to know the payout amount. However, the date and time of the request completely contradicted his words, as the girl was confirmed to be at work at that time, verified by surveillance footage from the store. Asked about the life-sized doll for intimate pleasures that he purchased even before his late wife was buried, and other expenses, he responded that he couldn't sleep alone and needed someone to hold, and that he bought the console, guitar, etc., as a way to distract himself from grief. His mother corroborated his statements, fiercely defending her son throughout the trial. The psychiatrist's conclusion about the victim's emotional state was pivotal. This meticulous work took time, but its results left no doubt that Kristen had not planned to end her life. Additionally, a curious detail emerged from the autopsy report regarding the bullet's trajectory angle. In the courtroom, the jury was shown the weapon used and the angle at which the bullet entered the girl's chin. Kristen was right-handed, but the nature of the wound suggested that either she shot with her left hand or someone positioned to her left had placed the gun to the head of the sleeping girl and fired. On November 20th, 2023, the jury unanimously found Colby guilty on all counts, sentencing him to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole no earlier than 50 years. The defendant never admitted his guilt, and all his appeals were rejected. Most curious and strange in this case, however, is that corrections regarding the cause of death were never made to the medical report. Australia is a continent known for its natural beauty, sandy beaches, deserts, and in some places, bushland. At the same time, Australia is one of the most highly urbanized countries with megacities such as Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth. Snapper Point is an Australian conservation area located near Fraser Park Beach, near Catherine Hill Bay, New South Wales. The area around Cape Snapper Point attracts intrepid tourists who climb it in search of unforgettable shots, as it is made up entirely of steep, uneven volcanic rocks. On April 24, 2016, at 10:30 a.m., a group of hikers walking at the foot of the promontory noticed something large floating on the surface of the water. They reported the find to law enforcement. The police arrived on the scene and removed an unknown package. Upon examining the find on shore, they discovered the body of an unknown woman with multiple injuries, indicating that the victim had been brutally assaulted. She was not identified, but news accounts described her as an Asian female between 20 and 35 years old of average height. 5 years earlier, a major airport in northern Sichuan province in the People's Republic of China saw off 20-year-old Meng Mei Leng in a torrential downpour. The girl tearfully said goodbye to her beloved mother. After the death of her father in 2008, her mom became the closest person to her. She flew from her native China to faraway Australia, where she had dreamed of studying since her childhood. 11 hours later, the plane landed in Sydney. It was the first time Meng Mei had made such a long journey alone, but she was in a hurry to achieve her dream, so she easily overcame any difficulties. She was met at the airport by her own aunt and her son, who was only 2 years younger than Meng Mei. The oldest and most populous state in Australia is New South Wales. 1 in 3 Australians live in its territory. It was here that Meng Mei's early years were spent after moving here. Since coming to Australia, Meng Mei has lived happily with her 48-year-old aunt, her young husband, Derek Barrett, and with her cousin in their camping house. The girl had a private room where she spent almost all of her free time. Meng Mei loved to read and draw, so she would spend hours in her room pursuing her favorite hobbies. For the convenience of living in another country, Meng Mei changed her name to Michelle. Michelle Leng enrolled at the University of Technology in Sydney, where she successfully studied economics and hospitality management. Michelle was very intelligent and motivated. She was not afraid of anything new and easily made new acquaintances. Like many girls of her age, she often posted photos in social networks, on which she drank cocktails with friends, as well as shots with extreme outings to dangerous places. By nature, Michelle was an adventurous person who could easily travel to Hobart for a vacation and regularly took day trips around New South Wales. In recent weeks, she posted videos from West Head Lookout near Sydney Harbour, photos from Resolute Beach, north of the city, from Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park, and from Very Beach on the south coast. On June 13, 2013, she visited Snapper Point, where she fearlessly photographed herself on the edge of a cliff and posted this prophetic photo to her Instagram account. Michelle excelled in her studies, made new friends, and found a part-time job. Wishing to arrange her personal life, Michelle regularly communicated with guys on dating sites and went on trial dates. The girl had an active and busy life where she attended classes during the day and then hurried to work. On her weekends, she was sure to meet friends and visit unusual places. On April 21, 2016, Michelle met up with a friend at the mall. They had lunch together, did some shopping, then Michelle boarded a train at the train station. She got off at Campsie Station around 4:30 in the afternoon and was never seen again. 2 days later, Derek went to the train station to meet his wife, who had returned from a business trip. Aunt Michelle asked Derek about his niece, and he said he had not seen her in 2 days. Derek Barrett had been unemployed for a long time, so he often stayed up late at the computer and woke up only in the afternoon, so it was obvious that he might not have seen Michelle. But the situation was such that nobody had seen Michelle since April 22nd, and her phone was switched off. Having called all Michelle's acquaintances and friends, the aunt became even more worried. She inspected the girl's room, but it was in complete order as always. After looking through the girl's laptop, the family concluded that Michelle had not returned from her date, and perhaps something had happened to her. Michelle's absence was quite unusual, as she was in daily contact with friends and family members living in China and Australia. The next day, Michelle's aunt and her husband Derek went to the police station and filed a missing persons report. They also reported Michelle Leng's disappearance to the Chinese embassy. On April 24, 2016, the body of an unidentified woman wrapped in a plastic bag was found by a group of tourists at Snapper Point. As Michelle's relatives in China and Australia searched for her, local news channels carried a report of the woman's body being found. A compiled sketch of the victim aired left no doubt Michelle had been found. It took the police 3 days to identify her after they made a sketch of her. From that point on, Michelle Leng was officially listed as a missing person. An investigation was launched. After interviewing close relatives living with Michelle, the first theory was that Michelle had been attacked by an unknown guy who Michelle had planned to meet that day. On CCTV, cameras restored the movements of the girl on the day of disappearance. But on surveillance cameras and on a short train journey, Michelle was alone. According to her friends, she had no plans to meet anyone that day and was in a hurry to get home. Reviewing social networks and correspondence of the girl did not confirm the presence of a young man with whom she could meet. The version about a secret stranger who could have committed the crime was not confirmed. The results of forensic examination were expected. The autopsy confirmed that Michelle's body had multiple injuries. She had most likely tried to fight off her attacker and suffered multiple stab wounds. Police Chief Inspector Gary Jubilan said the interpretation of the situation is that Michelle was brutally assaulted before her death. But she was spotted on her way home and did not go out anywhere else. So who could have attacked her with such atrocity? The inspector also noted that most likely the perpetrator had deliberately chosen a very lonely area of such a beautiful place. After all, the body was found in an area frequented by tourists and fishermen, but the place was somewhat isolated. Forensics found that Michelle Leng's body had been in the water for no more than 48 hours, and more likely much less, meaning that the body had been dumped quite recently. The chief inspector of police said that although the location where the body was found was far from the entrance to the national park, there was a parking lot near the tourist attraction, and so it was possible that the body had been taken there by car. Homicide detectives studied CCTV and traffic cameras to determine Michelle Leng's last movements. They continued to contact her family members, friends, and co-workers for additional information. Also, in addition to the search efforts, interviews continued with relatives and acquaintances in the hope of reconstructing a picture of the event and establishing the full picture of relationships in the family where Michelle lived. Police Inspector Gary Jubilan said with certainty that from all the information that has been collected about Michelle, she was very responsible, always stayed in touch with her family, informing them where she was going, so there were serious fears that there was trouble when she disappeared. However, for 2 days, none of the family noticed the girl was missing or simply didn't want to notice. Police called Derek Barrett in for questioning as the last person to see Michelle alive. Investigators were skeptical of his accounts of nightlife and long daytime naps, so he was re-interviewed. The investigators began asking questions about his relationship with Michelle and asked him to remember the last time he had seen her. Unable to withstand the pressure of the interrogation, Derek refused to answer the questions and demanded a lawyer. Such strange and uncertain behavior led to a number of doubts, and Derek was arrested as a suspect. However, the arrest had grounds. On the eve of the interrogation, investigators checked his cell phone signal and found that he was in the same area where Michelle's body was found on April 24th. When police obtained surveillance footage from a parking lot that captured a car matching the description of Derek Barrett's vehicle in the early morning hours of April 24th, there was no doubt that he was there. Derek denied and claimed to the last that it was just a coincidence and the car was not his, but the footage was clear enough to prove his presence in the parking lot. Police have charged a man in the death of 25-year-old Michelle Leng, whose naked body with multiple stab wounds was found in a blowhole on the central NSW coast. A 27-year-old man has been arrested and charged with murder. The news of the arrest and charge against Derek has left Michelle's entire family in shock. Police spoke to Michelle's mother, who was devastated by the news of her daughter's death. She rushed to Sydney to see the very scene of her only daughter's dream and death. The woman was still unable to comprehend her death. Derek Barrett, 27, married to Michelle Leng's aunt, was charged with the 25-year-old student's murder after police released CCTV footage capturing her last shopping trip in Sydney's central business district on April 21st and her drive home. The footage shows her shopping at a Pitt Street mall before boarding a train at St. James Station for a ride to Campsie in Sydney's southwest. Police believe Michelle returned to her family home in Campsie in the afternoon, where she lived with her uncle, aunt, and cousin. She is presumed to have been murdered in her home. Recall that the autopsy revealed that Michelle tried to fight off her attacker and was stabbed several times in defense, stabbing her more than 30 times in total. CCTV footage is believed to have captured a vehicle entering Lake Moanmorik National Park at around 7 a.m. on April 24th. Police claim Michelle Leng's body was inside the vehicle. Despite Derek Barrett being detained and charged, the investigation continued. Gradually, other details of Michelle Leng's final minutes of life surfaced. Based on these, further charges were laid, including 5 counts of indecent assault, 2 counts of installing a filming device, and murder. The investigation revealed that the suspect had an unhealthy sexual interest in his wife's young niece. When Derek Barrett's cell phone was seized and handed over to specialists to analyze and recover previously deleted data, the files found on the phone left no doubt that he was not only involved in Michelle's death, but had an unhealthy interest in her. It transpired that Derek had set up a hidden camera in the shared bathroom hidden behind toiletries and regularly reviewed the footage. The phone also contained images taken just before Michelle's death. Following these images, it was apparent that Michelle had returned home on April 21st around 5 p.m., and around midnight, she sent her last text message from her phone and had not been heard from since. Deep into the night, Derek Barrett began to put his devious plan into action. He entered Michelle's room again when she was asleep to perform the now customary shoot and satisfaction, but the girl woke up and Derek attacked her. He tied her up and put duct tape over her mouth to keep her quiet. The pervert kept her tied to the bed for 2 days and periodically abused her. In photos on his phone, investigators saw Michelle bound and naked, lying on the bed with a look of horror on her face. However, in these photos, Michelle did not yet have the injuries from which she died. Derek's last picture was taken around 8 a.m. on April 23rd, and at that time Michelle was alive. During the day of April 23rd, Derek's stepson Derek came home twice and did not hear Michelle's quiet moans. Derek was taking a shower at the time. Surveillance cameras determined that Derek left the apartment 4 times to take out the trash. Presumably by this time Michelle was already dead, and Derek, having showered and washed off traces of blood, thoroughly cleaned the house, hiding traces of the crime and Michelle's disappearance. On April 24th at 7 a.m., Derek drove to Snapper Point. On his way, he stopped at a gas station where he bought drinks and filled his car with gasoline. That's where he was caught on CCTV cameras. Upon arriving at Snapper Point, he disposed of Michelle's body and took some pictures around 9 a.m. Afterwards, Derek visited his parents, who noticed nothing unusual in his behavior, and then returned home to await his wife's return. With absolute equanimity, he reported several times that he had not seen Michelle, that the girl had not returned home, and cynically accompanied his wife to the police station to file a missing persons report. On June 29, 2016, the first court hearing was held. Barrett's lawyer, Bill Whitby, told Burwood Local Court that Barrett was pleading not guilty, and he was as shocked and upset by Michelle's death as the rest of the family. Michelle Leng's friends and family were in the packed courtroom, but Derek Barrett did not need to be present. He appeared later via video link. The fact is that the day before, the defendant reported that he didn't remember much in the hours before he killed Michelle Leng because he had taken illegal drugs the day before. He also told the court that he had only vague memories of the 2-hour trip to Snapper Point, where he threw Michelle Leng's body off the cliff. On this basis, before attending the court hearing, Derek Barrett was examined by a psychologist. However, forensic psychologist Dr. Richard First disputed the defendant's claims of memory loss. He testified and found Derek Barrett mentally fit to be punished to the full extent of his sentence. Dr. First testified that the drugs the suspect was taking did not cause memory loss. The doctor claimed that all of his actions were clear and purposeful, from the murder to the disposal of the body. Respected forensic psychiatrist Dr. Richard First also stated that Derek Barrett's IQ, concentration, and memory were within normal limits. He also did not believe Barrett's claims of memory loss and said the number of stab wounds indicated sadistic tendencies rather than memory lapses and acting on emotions. The psychologist also rejected Derek Barrett's claim that he did not feel sexually attracted to the victim. He bound, gagged, and stabbed the girl 30 times, but Derek Barrett claimed he had no memory of this. Dr. Richard First also told the court that the accused faked amnesia to mitigate his responsibility for the crime after he claimed he could not remember the period when he apprehended and killed Michelle Leng. Speaking at the trial, Derek Barrett tried to explain his crime by claiming that he was addicted to illegal drugs. However, this fact was also challenged by the doctor. Richard First pointed out that Derek's claim was self-defeating because it was obvious that the suspect had gained weight during that time period. Judge Wilson said that in his 30 years as a criminal defense attorney, he had never seen an obese, substance-dependent person. But unfortunately, there was nothing sincere about Derek Barrett's behavior in the courtroom in Sydney. Derek Barrett's behavior in court gave the impression of a psychopath. His crime was not the result of a drunken night out, some poor life choices, or childhood abuse. In August, at a retrial hearing, Derek Barrett pleaded guilty to murdering and kidnapping Michelle Leng, as well as twice sneaking into her room while she slept and making videos. He also admitted taking 19 explicit photos of Michelle Leng shortly before her death. Barrett said he could not remember the 48-hour period during which he killed the girl, including cleaning up the crime scene and dumping her body, because he was under the influence of illegal substances. He said his only memories were of an argument, blood in the bathroom, and the terrified face of his niece screaming at him. However, Judge Wilson said she did not believe Derek Barrett was telling the truth about his memory loss, nor did she believe he was truly sorry for what he had done. The Leng family consoled each other while Derek Barrett wiped away tears, telling them, "I deserve to live. This should never have happened." Passing sentence, Judge Helen Wilson went even further. She said it was a depraved and sadistic act committed by a person in a position of trust with Mrs. Leng. As the judge detailed Derek Barrett's fantasies and actions in front of a packed courtroom, he stared at the floor. He was no longer enjoying the attention, and it was abundantly clear that he had failed to fool anyone. Obviously, the events that had occurred must be seared into his brain, but the killer claimed they were nothing more than flashes in his memory because he had taken drugs a day or two before. He never flinched once in the court sessions, repeating his victim's name over and over again. Speaking to the court, Chief Inspector Gary Jubilin of the NSW Police Homicide Unit said the crime was horrific and senseless. "From an investigative point of view, it's nice that we got justice, but there's no joy in a case like this," he said. Judge Helen Wilson sentenced 28-year-old Derek Barrett to 34 years and 6 months in prison for his crime, with a maximum term of 46 years. He will be eligible for parole in 2050. Barrett showed no emotion when he was sentenced. Michelle's mother, Mrs. Jiang, thanked the Australian and Chinese communities for their support at a time when she is suffering greatly. She also thanked the NSW police, including Detective Inspector Gary Jubelin of the Homicide Squad, for investigating her daughter's death. A fund has been set up to pay for Miss Leng's funeral and to support her mother when she returns to China. But Michelle Leng's sad story did not end there. 4 years after the crime, inexplicable events occurred in one family. A woman often visited her elderly mother, and on one of these visits she found her sitting in a chair in the kitchen with an unknown USB device in her hands. When the daughter plugged the USB drive into her computer, she saw that it contained graphic videos and photos of obscene content and contacted the police. The thumb drive contained 9 video files that lasted more than an hour and 13 files with photos of Michelle Leng being abused shortly before she was murdered on April 23, 2016. The woman had no discernible connection to Derek Barrett, lived about 4 miles from his former home in Campsie, and it is not known where the USB drive came from or how it came into her family home. Police were able to match the photos to those that Derek Barrett deleted from his phone before his arrest in an attempt to hide his crimes from police. In 2020, Derek Barrett was charged with a number of sex offenses after videos of him abusing Michelle Leng were found on the USB drive in November 2019. But police and prosecutors admitted they were at an impasse over the discovery of the device, which led to the new charges. Prosecutor Hugh Baker told the court that the elderly woman with dementia was confined to the house and only went out into the yard. There is no explanation as to how the USB drive ended up in the woman's hands at the house in Strathfield, Baker told the court. Based on new facts and evidence, Derek Barrett has had his sentence extended without parole after images found by chance revealed the full extent of his abuse of Michelle before he murdered her. This horrifying, depraved secret, found by chance in the hands of an elderly woman in a leafy Sydney suburb, resulted in the convicted criminal receiving additional years of deserved punishment to his already lengthy sentence. Friends and acquaintances honored Michelle Leng on Chinese and Australian social media. Every story wants to be summarized, to break it down into its components in order to approach and understand whether it is possible, by changing the chain of events, to prevent bullying, fear, and crime. Obviously, unemployed Derek Barrett had nothing to do. The young man was in the active phase of puberty and physical strength. Lying at his computer all day and night, doing nothing, and demons took hold of his rotten soul. Perhaps if he had been working, there would have been no strength or desire for lust. But in this story, Derek's laziness, Aunt Michelle's pity, and her cousin's indifference played a cruel trick on her that cost her 2 days of humiliation, fear, and pain. Dear friends, cherish life because you never know which day will be your last. Teenagers can sometimes display aggression towards their peers, behavior often dismissed as part of growing up, with hopes they'll outgrow it. Yet we sometimes overlook the severity of such actions, as a violent teenager can pose a serious threat to their surroundings. Moreover, this unstable age often coincides with first loves, and when those feelings are not reciprocated, it can lead to tragedies. Such was the case with Gabriela Alino, a schoolgirl whose story shocked not only Chile, where the tragedy took place, but all of Latin America, leading to the enactment of the Gabriela Law. The girl met a tragic end at the hands of her boyfriend, a fellow teenager. She had broken up with him due to his temper and controlling behavior. The boy didn't take it well, resolving the matter in the most drastic way. He assaulted and took the life of the girl to whom he had recently professed love. He also took the life of the girl's mother, who became an accidental witness. Family and friends of the victim later claimed the tragedy could have been avoided, as the suspect had been stalking and harassing his victim. He broke into her home, stalked her in various places, and threatened to take her life if she didn't return. Dozens of witnesses heard these threats, but no one imagined he would follow through. Who was Gabriela Alino? Gabriela Alino Donoso was born on May 17, 2001, in the capital of Chile, Santiago. She was the only child of Federico Alcaino and Carolina Donosa Campos, and the first grandchild in a large, loving family. Her paternal uncle Rodrigo became her godfather and doted on her, just as her grandfather Carlos saw her as the center of his universe. Gabriela grew up surrounded by love and care. Her family wasn't wealthy, but they belonged to the middle class, doing everything they could to provide Gabriela with a good life, a solid education, and a good upbringing. When she was only 5 years old, her parents decided to divorce. Gabriela lived with her mother, who didn't remarry and devoted herself to raising her only child. Her father soon remarried, and Gabriela gained 2 younger half-brothers. Despite his new family, Federico continued to support his ex-wife and daughter financially and stayed involved in Gabriela's life and upbringing. Gabriela was a kind, open, and friendly child. She was somewhat shy and modest, but this didn't prevent her from making friends and getting along with her peers. She had an angelic appearance, which elicited admiration and delight from all who knew her. Gabriela excelled at school, loved music and dancing, and was also good at drawing. Her parents did their best to nurture her talents. She adored her younger brothers, spending weekends and holidays at her father's house, which was nearby. Her childhood, overall, could be described as a happy and carefree time, surrounded by loving family members. First love. At 15 years old, Gabriela, like most of her peers, fell in love for the first time. The boy's name was Fabian Casares Aravan, a fellow student at her school who was only a year older. Their romantic relationship was initially innocent. They would walk hand in hand, eat ice cream at cafes, steal kisses, and generally appeared to be a happy couple. Fabian came from a respectable and intelligent family. His parents were well regarded and sought to provide him with a solid education and raise him to be a good person. However, Fabian himself was considered withdrawn and secretive, speaking to others reluctantly, avoiding direct eye contact, and always looking away. Given his non-confrontational nature, many assumed he was shy or had adolescent timidity, but it's more likely he suffered from social anxiety. Gabriela even introduced Fabian to her father, who approved of her choice, finding the young man calm, dependable, and rational. He had a serious conversation with the boy, asking him to take care of his daughter, and Fabian promised not to harm her or let others harm her. Initially, their relationship was harmonious, with Fabian genuinely trying to be attentive and caring. However, this harmony didn't last long. After a few months, his controlling and cruel side emerged. Cesare sought to control every aspect of Gabriela's life, exhibiting jealousy, deciding who she should and shouldn't associate with. He checked her phone, demanded immediate responses to his calls and messages at all hours, and when this didn't happen, threw tantrums. A young tyrant and tormentor. For the first 6 months of the relationship, Gabriela tried not to give too much importance to her boyfriend's outbursts of anger and jealousy. She was madly in love, tried to comply with all his demands, and naively believed that things would soon change, and her beloved would become the same sweet and caring boy who had recently won her heart. However, Fabian only grew more irritable, volatile, and aggressive. He began to wear Gabriela down emotionally, but over time, he stopped at mere verbal abuse. He might slap her, grab her hair, or her hands. In most cases, these actions didn't leave noticeable marks, but sometimes friends began to notice bruises on her wrists and shoulders, the places where Fabian had gripped her roughly and shaken her forcefully. Alcaino tried not to complain or tell anyone about what was happening, but her friends and family began noticing her depressed state and her eyes perpetually wet with tears. She was no longer the smiling, open, and sociable girl she once was, gradually distancing herself from friends, avoiding contact with those Fabian forbade her from speaking to. Repeatedly, Gabriela tried talking to her beloved, but to no avail. She also broke off their relationship several times. only to return under Fabian's pressure. This went on for over a year. Breakup, stalking, and threats. In the fall of 2017, Fabian found himself in trouble for attacking a classmate. Although the incident didn't occur at school, it wasn't clear what happened. He was accused of mistreatment and assault, facing possible jail time, but the case was settled out of court. Fabian was still expelled and had to complete his education through homeschooling. After this incident, Gabriela decided to end things with Fabian for good. However, he wasn't pleased. At first, he apologized, promised to change, and asked her to come back. But after her refusal, he began stalking, blackmailing, and threatening her if she didn't resume their relationship. Fabian lurked around Gabriela's school or home, even trying to climb into her room through the window. He called her dozens of times from different numbers, sent texts, voice messages, and social media messages, harassing Gabriela. His messages ranged from tearful apologies to threats, but Gabriela remained resolute in ending the relationship. Sometimes Fabian would disappear for a week or more, giving Gabriela hope he had moved on, but he'd reappear, terrorizing her and refusing to leave her alone. He followed her everywhere, like a shadow, and could show up at the most unexpected places, screaming and causing a scene. Gabriela grew fearful of being alone, always going places with friends or family. After school, she went to her mother's work, and they'd go home together. When she needed to travel, she asked her father or uncle to accompany her. This continued for several months, and Gabriela was exhausted, though she tried not to complain. The beginning of a series of tragic events. At the beginning of 2018, a terrible tragedy struck the Alino family when a burglar broke into the home of Federico's second wife and took her life. The children were at school, and Federico was at work, leaving her alone. The perpetrator, a previously convicted neighbor, was caught immediately. Gabriela and her mother did everything they could to support the grieving Federico and help him with the children. This tragedy temporarily distracted Gabriela from thoughts of Fabian, who disappeared during this period. Gabriela also focused on preparing for entrance exams, dreaming of becoming a student at one of the most prestigious universities in Santiago, with aspirations of studying journalism or advertising. However, the tragedy was just the first in a series of heartbreaking events for the Alino family. By May 2018, Fabian reappeared, beginning to stalk Gabriela obsessively. She felt unsafe everywhere, as her ex-boyfriend could climb over her home's fence or show up near her at the supermarket or mall. In early June, Gabriela sent her two closest friends screenshots of her messages with Fabian, along with some voice messages where he threatened her, demanding she resume their relationship. Gabriela admitted she feared for herself and her loved ones. However, she didn't tell her family about the stalking and threats to avoid worrying them. The last family celebration. On June 10, 2018, the Alino family gathered at grandfather Carlos's house to celebrate his 80th birthday. Sadly, this joyous family event turned out to be the last day of life for Gabriela and her mother, Carolina. The evening seemed happy and uneventful. The house was filled with laughter and music, and the large family enjoyed a big meal together, celebrating Carlos's milestone and wishing him good health and many more years. Gabriela played with her younger brothers and the children of her uncle Rodrigo, though she appeared somewhat troubled and distant. Her uncle decided to talk to her, asking if everything was all right and if anything was bothering her. Gabriela only gave a sad smile, shrugged, and said she was nervous without specifying why. The uncle chose not to press, thinking she'd share when ready, but later regretted this decision deeply. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriela on the forehead, told her he loved her, and assured her she could count on his support in any situation. Then he returned home with his younger children. This was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and his first wife alive. A brutal crime. Around 4 a.m. on June 11th, Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, climbed over the fence of his ex-girlfriend's house. He intended to enter Gabriela's bedroom through the window and attack her, but suddenly the lights went on. The back door opened slightly, and Carolina appeared. She couldn't sleep and came to check on the noise. Fabian pounced on the unfortunate woman, pushed her back inside, and began stabbing her furiously. In total, he stabbed her 36 times, with most wounds landing on her chest, neck, and head, leaving her no chance of survival. Carolina managed only a couple of screams, but the noise woke Gabriela, who ran downstairs to find out what was happening. As she descended, she saw a bloodied and enraged Fabian, who caught and dragged her down. Gabriela held her phone, desperately trying to call emergency services, but couldn't. Fabian assaulted his ex-girlfriend, then stabbed her forcefully in the chest, piercing her heart. The single blow ended her life. He then moved her to the kitchen, where Carolina's lifeless body lay. He tried to erase his traces, wiping fingerprints and cleaning bloody footprints. He then washed himself and the murder weapon in the bathroom and quietly left around 5:30 a.m., leaving the house unnoticed by neighbors. In the following days, he acted as though nothing had happened. The grim discovery and the first suspect colleagues began to worry when Carolina missed work for 2 days and didn't answer phone calls. She was responsible and wouldn't disappear without reason. Her boss contacted Federico to find out what had happened. Federico was shocked and tried calling Carolina, but her phone didn't answer, and Gabriela's was off. He called his brother Rodrigo, who hadn't seen or spoken to Gabriela or Carolina since they parted ways after Carlos's birthday. Federico then left work and headed to Carolina's house. The house seemed empty, but their car was in the garage. Federico circled the house twice, knocking on doors and peering through windows, but hesitated to go in, even though he had a spare key. He called the police, asking them to check the house. The officers, upon learning he had a key, wondered why he hadn't used it, but Federico expressed fear of what he might find inside. At 11 a.m., he opened the door and entered with the officers. They saw 2 lifeless bodies in pools of blood on the kitchen floor. Carolina and Gabriela had been dead for over a day, but Federico, overcome with grief, screamed for an ambulance, demanding someone save them. They calmed Federico, but his behavior aroused suspicion, and he was led outside to a police car for questioning. When he tried to leave the car and found the door locked, he demanded an explanation. Realizing he was now the main suspect in a double homicide, Federico was devastated. Federico couldn't understand how he could be suspected of taking his own daughter's life. Rodrigo soon arrived and was also shocked that his brother wasn't released. He couldn't believe his niece was dead, asking why there wasn't an ambulance and why no one was trying to help. Both men were taken for questioning and their alibis were thoroughly checked. Both were cleared, as they were with family at the time of the crime. Then, friends of the deceased were questioned, revealing that Gabriela had been stalked by her ex-boyfriend. They provided screenshots of his messages and voice recordings with threats. Easier to take her life than let her go. Federico recalled his daughter's obsessive suitor, whom she had tried unsuccessfully to break up with. He never imagined the seemingly pleasant boy Gabriela introduced to him could commit such a heinous crime. The police went to Fabian Cesaris's house to investigate. After the double homicide, the young man lived a normal life, interacting with family and friends, visiting familiar places, and even posting a photo on social media, playing guitar at a party. When arrested on suspicion of murder, Fabian feigned surprise and grief, claiming he loved Gabriela and would never harm her. Fabian had disposed of the murder weapon and discarded some blood-stained clothes, but his shoes still had small drops of blood, and prints from his soles were found at the crime scene. Moreover, 4 of Gabriela's classmates testified that they had heard Fabian threaten her, shouting that it would be easier to take her life than let her go. Under pressure from evidence and witness testimonies, Fabian confessed to the crime but tried to portray himself as a heartbroken lover. He claimed he hadn't intended to harm Gabriela, only talked to her, but things escalated, and he dealt with her mother as an unwanted witness. yet he couldn't explain why he brought a hunting knife just to talk. Will he get the minimum sentence? After the autopsy and necessary tests, the bodies of the victims were returned to their family for burial. Hundreds gathered at the funeral to honor the deceased and offer condolences to their loved ones. Gabriela was buried in the white dress she had dreamed of wearing, but never got the chance to. Carolina was laid to rest in a closed casket, as her face had been mutilated beyond recognition. Fabian's family hired a skilled lawyer who crafted a strong defense and promised a minimal sentence for his client. During preliminary hearings, he emphasized Fabian's youth and clean record, arguing that the attack on his classmate had been settled out of court. The victim's relatives pushed for a femicide charge, but it was denied by the prosecution, as Chile's law only applied it in cases where the victim and perpetrator were married or lived together. Since the teenagers hadn't been in a close relationship at the time of the crime, the case wasn't classified as femicide during the investigation. Additionally, the lawyer argued that Fabian acted impulsively and in a state of distress. Consequently, he faced a potential 15-year sentence for double homicide and assault. The Alino family, understandably, demanded the harshest punishment for him. After initial hearings, the judge allowed both prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabian's lawyer requested his release pending trial, but the judge denied this, keeping Fabian in custody. Gabriela's law. Gabriela's father was outraged. In a short span, he had lost 3 women close to him, all to violent deaths. Now, the person responsible for the deaths of his ex-wife and daughter might get away with a minimal sentence. The lawyer tried to shift the blame onto the victims, and the authorities seemed ready to accept this. So, Gabriela's father and uncle, together with women's rights organizations, developed a proposal for Gabriela's law, which would expand the definition of femicide to include romantic relationships, even if the perpetrator and victim weren't married or living together. They were soon joined by the National Office for Women and Gender Equality, which actively advocated for the law. The bill faced opposition, as the proposed amendments would mean that perpetrators already serving time for similar offenses could face new charges and lose eligibility for early release. However, feminist organizations across the country supported the Alino family, staging marches and demonstrations in favor of Gabriela's law. In late August 2019, a year and 3 months after the tragic murders, amendments to the femicide law were presented at the highest legislative level. Gabriela's law included 15 amendments, eventually approved by Congress. Now, in the Republic of Chile, femicide includes any violence, injury, or murder of a woman due to gender-based hatred, regardless of the relationship between victim and perpetrator. Furthermore, if the victim is a minor or has health issues, these are considered aggravating circumstances. Trial and fair sentence. The trial of Fabian Cesares took place in April 2022, 4 years after he attacked his ex-girlfriend and her mother. Following the adoption of Gabriela's law, the defense was powerless. Fabian was charged with femicide under aggravating circumstances due to one victim being a minor, as well as double homicide and assault. On April 20th, Fabian was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. After the verdict, Federico and Rodrigo addressed the court, thanking the judges for their fair decision. They acknowledged that no sentence could bring back their daughter and niece, but that a life sentence for the perpetrator would protect other women from the same fate as Carolina and Gabriela. She just went for a walk along a familiar route she knew very well and always came back, but not this time. August 12th, 2019 started out completely normal. Teacher's assistant Lindsay was on vacation, and she planned to spend the day with her family. She and her daughter Sarah shopping in Blackburn in the afternoon, and then they agreed to have a nice family evening over a cup of tea and meet her daughter's human boyfriend. They said goodbye, and Lindsay returned home to change and go for her daily walk to the woods. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, she left the house and never came back. To delve into this sudden disappearance and try to figure out why this particular day tragedy happened and who is to blame. The events are set in the town of Blackbourn in the county of Lancashire in northwest England. The town is located in the southern part of the county on the Blackburn River by the Leeds-Liverpool Canal at the junction of 4 roads and near rich coal mines. Blackburn is renowned for its natural environment and has 4 huge wooded parks. Lindsay separated from her husband, Tim Burbeck, in July 2018, but they continued to live together in Clapton until March 2019. She then moved to her new home on Burnley Road in Hancote. Lindsay cared for her 2 adult children, Stephen, 20, and Sarah, 17. She worked as an upper-grade teacher's aide at Upton Hill Elementary School in Burnley and loved being surrounded by children. Lindsay was a talented artist who could go the extra mile to create the most amazing props for school productions and plays. On the fateful day of August 12th, she went for a walk in a wooded area known as Coppice near her home in the village of Hancote on the outskirts of Accrington and disappeared. At the appointed time, Sarah and her boyfriend Brandon arrived at Lindsay's home, but no one answered the door. Sarah became worried, as it was out of character for her mother to forget a scheduled tea party. She tried several times to contact Lindsay, but no one answered the phone. Sarah then sent her a text message that read, "Where are you? We sat outside for an hour and called 6 times. After receiving no response, Sarah sent another text message with a series of question marks, but again received no response. After waiting outside Lindsay's house for an hour, Sarah called her father, Tim Burbeck, to let him know her mom wasn't home and wasn't answering her phone. Tim took a frightened Sarah and Brandon back to his house. Near midnight, Sarah and Tim headed to Lindsay's house again, but with a set of spare keys. To their dismay, she never showed up. Inside, the house seemed quite ordinary and showed no signs of any incident. There was no note of explanation either. At 12:11 a.m. on the night of August 13th, Tim Burbeck contacted police and told the dispatcher, "My ex-wife seems to be missing. We can't find her. It doesn't look like her." Lindsay Burbeck was reported missing. Lindsay's disappearance shook up the community. The people of the small suburb banded together and went out in search of the woman. There were hundreds of people, men and women, grandparents and people walking dogs, teenagers with bicycles, and even moms with strollers. To most, Lindsay was a stranger. But that didn't matter. After days of desperate searches, social media appeals and posters, people still gathered at Coppice for 2 consecutive days in the hope of finding a vital clue that could solve the mystery of Lindsay Burbeck's disappearance. After several days of fruitless searching, it was clear to everyone that the search was going to be difficult. With each passing day, the chances of finding Lindsay alive dwindled. Detectives classified Lindsay Burbeck as high risk. She had never gone missing before, and her family described the disappearance as very uncharacteristic of her. Nevertheless, the search did not stop for a moment. Locals printed thousands of posters to distribute throughout the neighborhood, while a Facebook group associated with the search quickly grew to 10,000 members. A few hours after the police appeal was posted online, the first posters with Lindsay's face on them could be seen all over the neighborhood. Within a couple of days, there wasn't a lamppost, storefront, or traffic light that didn't have a poster calling for the search for Lindsay. Police launched an investigation into the disappearance from the house, as extensive searches were carried out by specialist police officers, dog handlers, Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service, mountain rescue volunteers, and the city's search and rescue team. Drones and helicopters were also deployed to search the area covering Coppice and the surrounding open countryside for a considerable distance, including popular walking and running routes. 4 days after Lindsay's disappearance, Lancashire police released CCTV footage showing when she was last seen alive. Walking along Burnley Road at 4:10 in the afternoon towards Coppice, she was wearing a purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. A week had passed since her disappearance on August 19th, and with each passing day, there was less and less hope of finding Lindsay Burbeck alive. Police are still no closer to the whereabouts of the mother of two, but emphasize that there was no evidence that she was the victim of a criminal act, meaning there was still a chance of finding her alive. The search for Lindsay continued. That evening, hundreds of local residents took part in the first mass public search of Kappas after a rallying call was made on social media. Things moved when a local resident's dog ran into a wooded area in Accrington Cemetery. He yelled and called her name several times, but the dog didn't respond. The dog hit its head in the bushes, sniffing and trying to dig for something. The dog's owner walked over to him, stood next to him, and was horrified to find that there was something very soft under his feet. He was frightened and bounced back. Then he smelled a horrible odor and flies were swirling around. A plastic bag and something that looked like a foot were visible from the ground. On August 24th, 12 days after Lindsay Burbeck disappeared, her body was found under the most horrific circumstances buried in a cemetery. The naked body, wrapped in 2 clear plastic bags mixed with earth and grass, was placed across a shallow grave. The search for Lindsay Burbeck was considered complete. A murder investigation was officially launched. Pathologist Dr. Naomi Carter, after conducting an autopsy, determined that death was due to a broken neck. The trauma was inflicted with such force that the entire larynx had crushing injuries. The neck was most likely struck with a foot or knee. An attempt to cut off Lindsay's right leg after death was also determined, possibly with a saw, as tine marks were found. A large laceration was found on the leg, which had been cut down to the bone. The injuries Lindsay suffered were catastrophic. Dr. Carter also reported that due to the poor condition of the body, it was quite difficult to determine the victim's injuries. But she did not rule out any sexual activity on the day of her disappearance, which could not be ascertained due to the level of decomposition of the body. Prior to the discovery of Lindsay's body, members of the public and police had searched the same area for several days without success. Community volunteers and a police dog handler reported seeing a blue wheelie garbage can abandoned in bushes nearby. However, at this stage of the investigation, no one was yet aware of the significance of the tank. Volunteers who searched the cemetery at 9 p.m. August 20th also found the same dumpster with a dark stain on the outside and thought it might be blood. After taking pictures of the dumpster, they called the police. 2 police officers arrived on the scene to inspect it and found a brown mark that they thought was dirt. The police said the dumpster looked brand new and there was no evidence at the time to link it to Lindsay's disappearance. Therefore, it was left in place. There were other important clues found in the cemetery that were not immediately accepted. For example, local resident Christine Alderson discovered a bloody cloth on the grass of the cemetery on August 18th while she and her daughter were walking their dogs. She said the blood on the cloth was fresh and red, but thought it might have belonged to a homeless man who frequented the area. Another woman who walks dogs, Judith Bibby, reported seeing red clothing hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cargill Hill Trail that was probably Lindsay's jacket. She also heard a voice, presumably a child's, but heard no struggle, yelling, or screaming. On August 25th, investigators revisited the crime scene and found a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green, heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave that had several traces of blood. The evidence was taken to forensic testing, and it came back positive. The gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside surfaces, and Lindsay's DNA was found on the outside surface of the left glove. A pair of her Skechers sneakers, which had been cut along the sole, were also found in a blue plastic bag discarded in the cemetery. Examination of other evidence revealed that Lindsay's body was wrapped in some kind of plastic sheeting, and between the body and the sheeting was found foliage and grass that was not in the cemetery grounds. This led investigators to believe that the body had been moved from another location. That's when detectives remembered a blue trash can that had repeatedly caught the attention of volunteers. Police officers studying the CCTV footage soon made a startling discovery that left the investigation team baffled. Several images showed a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area. Over the next few days, a CCTV camera captured a certain guy returning to the cemetery 4 times. Thanks to that footage, a suspect emerged. The video of a young guy carrying a trash can down the street, possibly with Lindsay's body, became a sensation. The video was shown on the news with a plea for help identifying the man. And it worked. The boy was identified by shocked teachers and parents. The team surrendered to police the same day. His name was withheld until sentencing due to his age. He was only 16 years old at the time of the crime. The boy in the videotape turned out to be local resident Rocky Marciano Price. Rocky Marciano Price lived with his parents and 5 siblings on Winnie Hill Road in Accrington. It had been the Price family home for about 3 decades. The young lad had an impressive array of mental health abnormalities. Rocky had suffered from autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity since childhood. His low IQ created additional learning and communication challenges. He attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick several days a week and was described by teachers as a very quiet and non-speaking student. In 2015, a psychologist assessed Price as having a limited understanding of his own emotions and his own emotional well-being. He had pronounced impairments in understanding the connections between events and emotions. Another 2016 report described Price as unresponsive to strangers and in constant need of supervision and care. Timothy Bradley, who taught at the school for 18 months, said they were always looking for ways to involve him in education, but Price preferred practical things to academic subjects. Price hardly ever engaged in conversation, even when it came to a topic that interested him. Teachers described Rocky Price as quite strong physically and tough for his age. He went to the gym regularly, liked to tend to the chickens on the family farm, and loved watching movies and playing Xbox. The guy lived in his own world and wasn't always aware of his actions. So what drove him to attack Lindsay Burbeck? Nothing at all. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time when Rocky Price was hunting lonely women. He was looking for a woman to kill, and he didn't care who it was. This was a completely random murder at the hands of a stranger. On August 12, 2020, exactly 1 year after the crime, Price finally stood trial. Rocky Marciano Price was unanimously found guilty by a jury after an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation. Appearing via video link from Her Majesty's Prison Wetherby, Price, 17, did not react in any way when the judge read out the verdict. There was also no reaction from his parents in court. He pleaded guilty to helping dispose of Lindsay's body, but claimed he played no part in her death. Rocky Price claimed he was approached by a male stranger and asked to assist in the burial of the woman for a fee. In a prepared statement, he admitted moving the garbage can and burying the body, but said he had no involvement in Lindsay's death. However, a search of his home in Accrington revealed plastic bags that were identical to those at Lindsay's grave. A tracksuit and other clothing was also analyzed and matched the one he was wearing on surveillance cameras on August 12, 16, and 17. Defense attorney Mark Fenhalls told jurors that Price did a horrible and heinous act by burying the woman's body in the cemetery, but he was not her killer. Despite the abundance of evidence against him, Rocky Price pleaded not guilty to the crime, but admitted to moving Lindsay's body. After 2 days of questioning, Price, through his attorney, prepared a statement to explain his movements between Coppice, where police believe Lindsay was killed, and the cemetery where her body was found. But the prosecutor affirmatively stated that Rocky Price acted completely alone. The motive for the random attack on the 47-year-old mother of 2 was never revealed, as the perpetrator did not even know the victim. The judge sentenced Price to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. He will only be released when the parole board decides he is not a danger. The judge said the attack was swift and brutal. There was no doubt the defendant sprung with the intent to kill a woman who was walking by. Just minutes before Lindsay's incident, Zoe Braithwaite had managed to get away from a hooded teenager with her hands in her pockets walking alone on a parallel path. Her sixth sense kicked in, and the woman was instantly wary. Zoe was confused by the guy's appearance. He looked out of place for a walk in the woods for this time of year. She quickened her step and then ran away. That probably saved the woman. If it hadn't been her, it could have been someone else. And it was Lindsay. This was a premeditated attack. After missing one woman, he didn't back off his plan to attack another lone woman. His actions after the crime clearly showed that he had the ability to plan and reason. His teachers told the court that he was much better at practical tasks than academic subjects. He used this ability to hide his body. Rocky Price was found to have made 2 return trips to Coppice on the evening of August 12th. The first incident occurred at 6:55 p.m. when he was seen on CCTV cameras carrying a black rucksack. Possibly in it, he was carrying a found saw to dismember Lindsay's body. The next incident occurred at 8:28 p.m. when dog walker Anthony Dewhurst was seen pulling out an already empty garbage can. This is the same spot where his grandfather, who bears his name, and other family members are buried. Without panic or excitement, young Rocky Price, acting alone, set in motion a plan to dispose of Lindsay's body by placing it in a blue garbage can like a piece of trash, and then burying it in a shallow grave in Accrington Cemetery, wrapped in 2 plastic bags. He set in motion a plan to dispose of Lindsay's body by first hiding her in a blue wheelie garbage can and then dragging her to the cemetery. Finding a quiet and secluded spot near the railroad line, he spent over an hour burying her body before leaving a saw, gloves, and a trash can at the scene. The murder of a stranger in broad daylight, for which there is no rational explanation, is particularly horrifying to all right-thinking members of society. The random nature of the attack suggests that the accused poses a very real danger to members of the public. The stalking of another woman before he killed Lindsay Burbeck demonstrates that his crime was not caused by a sudden loss of control. 24 hours after he was found guilty of the crime, publication restrictions were finally lifted by a judge, allowing his name and picture to be made public for the first time. Rocky Marciano Price's identity was kept secret during the first and second trial. The jury was told many important details about Price, but they could not be fully disclosed because of his young age. The judge rescinded the disclosure of the restrictions after the jury unanimously found Price guilty of the crime. The defendant's mental illness cannot in any way excuse or even explain his actions. After all, it is quite obvious that he realized that it was terribly wrong to kill, but did it anyway. Although fortunately such crimes are rare, they instill fear in society. However, the main question in this case remains unanswered. Why did the young guy needed to kill a strange woman, and for what? Only Rocky Price knows the answer. But he didn't answer it. Perhaps if it wasn't Lindsay Burbeck, it could have been someone else. Lindsay's funeral was held at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th. More than 200 mourners gathered at the church as police stopped traffic on Manchester Road, while Lindsay's coffin with her body covered in flowers was carried into the church. Dozens of flowers from friends and family, and from strangers whose hearts were touched by Lindsay's story, were left at the scene. Sarah described her mom as a very optimistic and positive woman. Lindsay was making plans for the future. She was planning a trip to Glasgow with her friend Sharon. She dreamed of finding love on the Match.com dating site. Lindsay Burbeck planned a long and happy life for herself and looked forward to the future with optimism. But all those dreams were interrupted one sunny summer day. Lindsay Burbeck's family and the detectives who investigated the crime welcomed the jury's unanimous verdict, but said no court verdict could ever bring Lindsay back or spare her family and loved ones the grief of loss. In front of the courthouse after the verdict was announced, members of the defendant's family wore T-shirts that read, "Wrongfully convicted, set this boy free." The back of the T-shirts read, "The killer is still at large." Maybe Price is an aspiring maniac. He just wanted to take a man's life. to feel what it's like, to watch someone die and mutilate them. Most likely in any form, it's an absolute neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by problems with social interaction, motor, and behavioral stereotypes. In translation, the word autism means a person who has gone into himself or a person within himself. Autism is still an understudied developmental disorder that can occur due to genetic or hereditary abnormalities. The exact cause is not fully understood, but in our story, the punishment most likely fits the crime. This is not a story about Romeo and Juliet. Have you ever noticed how many worthy, talented, and magnanimous individuals pass away young? Some people, barely crossing into their 20s or 30s, leave this life suddenly. It often seems like there were no signs of impending trouble. They lived, worked, and planned for the future, just like everyone else. However, misfortune, illness, or criminal acts disrupt the usual order, and so those who once showed great promise and were intelligent and determined are now gone. In an attempt to find solace, or due to helplessness in the face of the situation, it's often said that the heavens take the best. This same tragedy struck Jamie and Peter James. None of them could have imagined the horrific ordeal that was to come, to bury their beloved daughter. Unexpected news. On October 26, 2023, around 4:30 a.m., the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School, located in central Sydney, sent out an email to all students' parents. It stated that the school would be closed until the end of the week due to a critical incident. 2 hours later, worried families received another notification. The administration assured that none of the students were involved. However, the news was unsettling, especially since it was later clarified that this directive did not apply to graduating students taking exams. For those distressed by the situation, psychological support was made available. Soon, a round-the-clock consultation center was set up in the school library. On Thursday and Friday, the school building and surrounding area were thoroughly searched by forensic teams. Access to the gym was restricted, and the adjacent shower area was slated for demolition soon. So what terrible event had occurred within the school walls? A corpse in the shower. Around midnight on October 25, 2023, the body of a 20-year-old woman was found. She had last been seen alive at 7 p.m. The water polo coach had entered the gym's shower and never came out. Surveillance cameras recorded someone following her. Around 8 p.m., the pursuer left alone and headed towards the school exit. The woman's parents were the first to raise an alarm about her disappearance. Lily had been uncontactable all day, and at 10 p.m., she sent a message asking to be picked up from work. Fortunately, the police, already informed about the situation, took care of it instead. The night guard, making his rounds, witnessed a horrific scene. A woman lay in a pool of blood on the floor with a shattered head. After recovering from the initial shock, he called emergency services. Later, detectives invited a family friend for body identification. The woman's face was so disfigured that it was hard to recognize the once beloved Miss James. After the news of her death reached the public, her home was filled with people. Friends, neighbors, and acquaintances came to support her grieving family. Local residents also expressed their sorrow and respect for the prematurely departed, continuously bringing flowers and toys, turning the area around the house into a memorial. Yet this mysterious death was not the only intrigue in this case. Another tragic loss. On October 27th at 8 a.m., just 11 miles from the scene of the first crime, the remains of a man were discovered. This grim find was made by vendors working nearby. The body was located on the rocks of Diamond Bay Reserve, close to Vaucluse, an eastern suburb of Sydney. After a call to the police, a rescue team was promptly assembled. The operation included a bomb squad, Marine Corps, and a rescue helicopter. At 3:30 p.m., the man's body was retrieved and taken to forensic experts for identification. Due to the injuries sustained from a high fall, visual inspection was not possible, so fingerprints were used for this purpose. At that time, experts suspected the identity of the man. However, confirmation was needed for certainty. Eventually, the man was identified as 24-year-old Paul Thiessen, who was suspected in the crime against Lily James. Investigators had a challenging task ahead: to draw parallels between the two fatal incidents and to uncover what had happened between these individuals a few days earlier. A diamond among the stones, Lily was born in the last spring month of 2002 in the coastal town of Sanssouci, New South Wales, Australia. She was the first and cherished child of the close-knit James family. She was especially adored by Barbara, her maternal grandmother. Lily spent her childhood with her younger brother Max by the ocean. She was very active and enduring, with a passion for swimming. Her father, who coached the water polo team at an Anglican girls' school in Hurstville, supported his daughter's interest. Friends recalled that she was sociable and friendly, excelled in her studies, and helped those who were struggling. These qualities endeared her to many, ensuring she was never alone. In her upper school years, thanks to her achievements in academics, sports, and community life, she was recognized as one of the best students. Whatever she took on, she succeeded in. Her incredible talent to excel in all areas of activity was undeniable. She also had an interest in the dramatic arts, which led her to participate in the theater and dance club. Over time, the talented young woman was noticed and invited to participate in the famous Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events, attended by around 125,000 people, including local, national, and international guests. The event usually takes place from December 27th to January 1st, marking the New Year's celebration. With a broad selection of genres and styles like circus, cabaret, comedy, street performances, workshops, debates, and more, Lily chose to perform a unique rendition of a monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. During the performance, her skills, natural charisma, and allure were fully displayed. Receiving unprecedented applause and approval from the jury, she secured second place in the theater category. This was a true success and a great boost, as our heroine not only gained recognition, but also a significant monetary prize. In 2018, the young Miss James added another achievement to her collection. She passed her beginner's driving test. Her athletic successes deserve special mention, too. Following in her father's footsteps, she began to pursue water polo professionally. The athlete earned the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category. Understandably, her parents were thrilled with their daughter's successes and celebrated each accomplishment grandly. By her senior year, Lily had definitively decided on her future life, focusing on a sports career. Thus, in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to pursue a bachelor's degree in sports business management. A fateful encounter. At the beginning of 2021, a new chapter began in our heroine's life. To spice up her college routine and gain teaching experience, she took a job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School. Thanks to her youth, vibrant personality, and love for sports, she quickly connected not only with her colleagues in administration, but also with the group she was entrusted with. The students were drawn to her, striving to match her standards. In turn, she tried to find a unique approach to each student and highlight something special. It was during this time that Lily met the new cricket and hockey coach, Paul Thiessen. With his professional skills and striking appearance, he quickly caught the attention of those around him. The ambitious young man, in addition to his main job, also taught part-time at another educational institution and was a member of the University of New South Wales hockey team. Paul was undoubtedly popular, especially among female audiences. However, opinions about him were mixed. Some described him as proud and headstrong, while others noted his positive traits. Initially, the interaction between Lily and Paul was friendly and limited to mutual greetings. However, it later developed into something more. Lily's friends shared that one day the young man asked her out on a date. Given Paul's dazzling smile, it was hard for her to resist, and she agreed. The date made a strong impression on both, and they decided to meet again. Unaware of whom she was becoming involved with, Lily, due to her own kindness and openness, fell in love. It seemed that Paul reciprocated her feelings. He showered her with compliments, gave her flowers, and organized evenings together. At that moment, the young couple agreed that no one at the school, especially the students, should know about their warm relationship. This was a requirement of the school's policy and Lily's personal beliefs. She never wanted her personal life to be public. Therefore, at work, the couple was cautious. However, over time, rumors began to spread. Initially, timid whispers turned into a full-blown public discussion. When Lily found out who had disclosed their relationship, she was deeply disappointed. It turned out that Paul had broken their agreement. Moreover, the way he portrayed his companion led to condemnation towards the young employee. She felt betrayed and humiliated, so she confronted her boyfriend about everything she thought of him and ended the relationship. Later, it was learned that Paul tried to reconcile and repeatedly asked for forgiveness, but Lily was resolute. The only consolation for her was that their relationship was short-lived. During that time, she had seen his true character. Fortune's favorite Paul was born in 1999 in the Netherlands. The Thiessens moved to Australia in 2015 when the family head was transferred to a new position. It must be said that his parents were affluent and well-known within certain circles. As an only child, Paul received ample attention and care from his family, which certainly shaped his character. He grew up spoiled and self-centered. The younger Thiessen knew his worth, excelled academically, and was active in sports. His impressive physical fitness was immediately noticeable. After relocating, Paul enrolled at St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he joined the cricket team. He achieved great success, earning recognition and respect from his peers. Over time, he was appointed team captain. He also actively participated in extracurricular activities and festivals, helping with their organization. That's when opinions about him began to diverge. Some boys disliked their overly confident peer who claimed he could win over any girl's heart. However, the ladies found the young man charming and personable. After graduating in 2017, the school administration offered him the opportunity to stay on as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey. He gladly accepted the offer. By early 2018, he had taken over managing these sections. It must be said that he felt confident in his workplace and successfully assumed a leadership position. Eventually, Paul resigned and returned home with his family. The reason for his sudden departure remains unknown. Back home, he decided to continue his education and earned a master's degree in sports management. In a conversation with old friends, he mentioned that he had improved his coaching skills, which soon led to a lucrative offer from his former employer. In early 2020, the doors of the familiar school reopened for him. Upon returning to Australia, Paul met a former friend who suggested they share housing expenses. The young man agreed, finding shared living more enjoyable, even though he could afford to rent alone economically. The rented apartment was located in Kensington, an eastern suburb of Sydney. Initially, the friends got along well, relaxing together at bars after work. However, a few months later, a conflict arose. The fiery Paul decided to live alone. The Thiessens confessed that despite being busy and constantly surrounded by people, their son felt lonely. They knew nothing of any romantic relationships, though they suspected he had not experienced serious love interests. In March 2020, an unexpected event occurred both nationally and globally. Due to a coronavirus outbreak, Australia declared an emergency and imposed strict quarantine measures. For 18 months, Paul was left to his own devices, unable to leave the country to see his family due to infection risks. The massive restrictions affected all areas of life, leaving Paul to fend for himself. By the summer of 2021, life had returned to normal. However, it turned out that isolation had impacted interpersonal relationships. When Paul resumed his previous duties, some began to notice changes in his character and behavior. He soon returned to the sports world and became a key player on the hockey team, continuing to lead an active lifestyle, even appearing in match advertisements. At the same time, acquaintances noted characteristics not previously seen in him, such as uncontrollable outbursts of anger. Additionally, rumors spread at the school that he had a particular interest in his female students. The young coach repeatedly flirted with teenage girls, often watching them for extended periods, causing them to blush and feel awkward. Nevertheless, Thiessen continued to be regarded as a significant figure. His performance had a substantial impact on the team's progression to the finals of the Australian Hockey League. Imagine the blow to his ego when Lily ended their relationship. Following Paul's trail. When investigators began probing the case, there was no doubt about Paul's involvement. After the discovery of a woman's body, they quickly got on the trail of the culprit. Surveillance cameras, both inside and outside, played a significant role in this. The young man carelessly appeared on them. Several inquiries were also made to Lily and Paul's cell service provider. The police needed to determine his last known location, so they decided to track the suspect via GPS. They also wanted to find the victim's phone, hoping that the messages it contained could shed light on what had happened. After some time, the locations of the devices were established. Furthermore, by reconstructing the sequence of events, it was discovered that Paul had bought a hammer at a hardware store a couple of days before the attack. Apparently, he was very angry with the girl and decided to confront her in this way. Although her innocence in the situation seemed clear, the sequence of events unfolded as follows. Tragic conclusion. On the morning of October 25th, Lily went to university and then to her job in the afternoon. At the same time, her ex-boyfriend rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school. Since he had no classes, he didn't enter the building but waited in the car instead. After all the students had left the building, the perpetrator walked to the gym. To avoid carrying the hammer openly, he hid it under his jacket. Once at the scene, Paul watched Lily's movements. After finishing her training, she decided to freshen up and headed to the shower. Seizing the moment when she was most vulnerable, the perpetrator followed her. An argument ensued, during which Thiessen attacked her and struck her head. Pathologists confirmed that her death was instantaneous. She did not suffer. After waiting an hour, the young man collected the girl's personal belongings in a backpack and left the building. Outside, he got into the car and drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the weapon in the garbage container. Surveillance cameras recorded him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. The last known location of Paul, tracked by investigators, was The Gap, a cliff at South Head in Vaucluse, an eastern suburb of Sydney. This spot is known for several reasons. It's not only popular with tourists, but also notorious for numerous suicides. Around 10 p.m., using Lily's phone, Paul sent a message to Mr. James, likely to lead to the discovery of the girl's body. Perhaps he regretted what had happened and hoped she could be helped, or he was simply informing her parents about their daughter's location. They were clearly worried, as indicated by dozens of calls made to the phone. An hour later, the young man made a brief emergency call, but changed his mind and hung up. After that, he made a decision he had been contemplating for a long time. He stepped into the abyss and ended his life. Final clues. Upon arriving at the cliff, police did not find the young man, but they did discover the personal belongings of the former lovers. A rented car was found parked nearby. Everything indicated that the young man was no longer alive. He might have been unable to cope with his guilt, or unwilling to face the consequences of his actions. In any case, the first priority was to locate his body. On October 26th at 9 a.m., police helicopters and boats arrived at Vaucluse. The entire coastline was patrolled, and the area around the cliff at Diamond Bay was cordoned off. However, the first day of searching yielded no results. By chance, the young man's body was washed onto the rocks of the reserve the following day. After an autopsy and examination, Paul Thiessen was officially declared responsible for Lily James's demise. However, it was impossible to hold him accountable, and the criminal case was closed. His body was later given to his parents, who decided not to repatriate him to the Netherlands, but to cremate him and scatter his ashes in Sydney. Farewell. Lily's funeral took place on November 17, 2023, at her former school in Hurstville. About 500 people came to say goodbye to a beloved relative, friend, and coach. At that moment, grief united everyone. The school administration arranged a live broadcast of the ceremony. Notably, the girl's family asked attendees not to wear dark clothes, but instead to dress in bright colors, as they believed Lily would have wanted. She was lively, energetic, creative, and unique, so a somber outfit would hardly have suited her. Many warm and sincere words were spoken about her. In response, the James family thanked everyone who had been with them during those difficult days for their support and help. At the entrance to the building, students and colleagues created a makeshift memorial in honor of their favorite. Flowers and farewell letters were placed next to it. As a tribute and respect, the school's website published a video of Lily performing a monologue from Macbeth. Conclusions. After all the circumstances of the innocent girl's death were established, the school management sent another email to the students' parents. It apologized to everyone affected by the tragedy. The principal assured that the crime was completely unexpected and would not happen again. Understandably, many were concerned that a place where children should feel safe had become the epicenter of a brutal act. The administration urged everyone to see this as an isolated incident and to continue their education with renewed vigor. Later, a meeting was arranged with renowned forensic psychologist Tim Watson-Monroe, who has years of experience in analyzing the minds of both criminals and victims. He was asked to speak about what happened and to analyze Paul Thiessen's behavior. The expert assured that Paul's actions were typical of individuals with inflated self-esteem who cannot accept rejection. He believed Paul committed the act not in a burst of emotion, but deliberately and coldly. He did what he wanted and showed no remorse. When asked why the young man ended his life, Mr. Watson-Monroe stated that the perpetrator wanted to avoid responsibility and shame. Overall, he described Paul as a narcissistic individual with psychopathic tendencies. He also noted that some likened the event to the finale of Shakespeare's famous tragedy, Romeo and Juliet. However, the story of Lily and Paul is distinct from that of the main characters in the play and creates a completely new narrative. Love has no room for pride and lies, much less deceit and betrayal. Sadly, Paul failed to understand this and to appreciate the person who was by his side. By prioritizing his bruised ego, he permanently erased the life of a girl who brought light. At the same time, he caused enduring suffering not only for Lily's parents, but also for his own loved ones. Unfortunately, for the nurturing, care, and attention he received, he repaid them with bitter regret. On June 8, 2018, fishermen aboard a commercial vessel near the Long Island Strait noticed something unusual in the water. Closer inspection from the deck revealed it to be a man's body. The fishermen immediately reported their discovery to the Coast Guard. Police arriving at the scene retrieved the body of a young man from the shore. They noted unexplained bruises and abrasions on the body. It was later identified as Spencer Mackford, who had been reported missing a few days earlier along with his girlfriend, Sophia McKenna. To determine the circumstances of Spencer's demise, his body was sent for examination. The autopsy results indicated that drowning was the cause of death. Experts found no signs of violence, and all injuries were attributed to water. It's important to note that the details of the autopsy were not disclosed. The same weekend Spencer and his girlfriend disappeared, 2 other men also went missing in the area. Their bodies were later found, having drowned as well. From the outset, the police believed these were tragic accidents due to unfavorable circumstances, leading to the young individuals drowning. No other theories about the incident were considered at the time. However, the body of Spencer's companion, Sophia McKenna, was never found. This enigmatic tale unfolded on the night of May 27, 2018, in the small town of Groton, located in Connecticut, in the northeastern United States. The case remains unsolved, raising more questions than answers. The main characters of the story are 2 young people who decided to take a walk and visit the lighthouse in New London, situated on the banks of the Thames River and considered a mystical place by the locals. The historic lighthouse, constructed in 1909, is famous for rumors about mysterious phenomena associated with the ghost of its first keeper, Ernie. According to legend, Ernie's beloved left him, and in despair, he ended his life by jumping from the lighthouse's roof. Since then, locals and visitors have reported strange occurrences at the lighthouse. Some speak of unexplained phenomena, such as doors and windows opening by themselves, while others mention bedsheets slipping off beds. Sailors have told of radios turning on without apparent reason and ships mysteriously unmooring from the shore. Consequently, the lighthouse has become the focus of numerous television programs dedicated to paranormal phenomena. Although these claims are merely rumors, the place continues to attract people with its mysterious and unusual aura. Spencer and Sophia were among those who had long dreamed of visiting this enigmatic lighthouse and set out there on the eve of Memorial Day. However, something went awry that night. What exactly happened remains unknown. Family members and the police can only speculate based on the few available facts. On Saturday, the 27th, Sophia McKenn's friend Austin tried to contact her, but got no response to his calls. At first, he didn't think much of it, knowing that Sophia usually slept late. However, after several hours of unsuccessful attempts to reach her through calls and messages, Austin grew worried. He contacted Sophia's mother, Michelle, to find out if Sophia had called her the previous night. Michelle hadn't checked her cell phone, as her younger daughter had been playing with it since morning. When Michelle finally looked at her phone, she found 7 missed calls from an unknown number. Trying to call back, she reached the voicemail of Spencer, a friend of her daughter's, and realized those might have been calls from Sophia. Michelle tried to reach Sophia but also got no response. Panic set in, and she and Austin immediately began searching. Austin called all the local hospitals, while Michelle filed a missing persons report with the police. Contacting Spencer's family, they learned that his relatives were also worried since he hadn't shown up for an important family gathering and hadn't responded to their attempts to contact him. They went to Spencer's apartment but found no signs of his presence there the previous night. Spencer's father knew his son had been meeting with Sophia the evening before, which caused concern for him and his wife due to the problem Sophia was facing. Spencer's mother mentioned that her son had planned to go fishing with a friend, but she felt he was lying and actually intended to meet Sophia that evening. She last spoke with her son at 10 p.m. when he wished her good night. Realizing something had happened, Spencer's family also reported his and his girlfriend's disappearance to the police. Around 6:30 p.m., the police began searching for the missing young people. At that time, Austin contacted the sheriff to inform him that he had information about where Sophia and Spencer were the previous night. He explained that he knew this because he had allowed Sophia to go there. Austin also mentioned that he stumbled upon a video posted by Sophia on Snapchat the previous night. Sophia had recorded the video on Spencer's mobile phone while they were on a boat heading towards the lighthouse. The footage showed the back of a young man rowing towards the lighthouse. Everything looked good, and they were having fun. Later, Sophia uploaded this video to her Snapchat account. Later, at 2 a.m., a photograph of Sophia was uploaded to Spencer's chat. She was playfully posing with the concrete barrier of the lighthouse in the background, marked with a "Do Not Cross" sign. What happened just minutes after this photograph remains a complete mystery. 5 minutes after the photograph was posted, at 2:05 a.m., the first call from Spencer's mobile phone was made to Michelle, Sophia's mother, followed by 3 more calls at 2:06, 2:08, and the last call at 2:09. Michelle, who was asleep at the time, didn't answer any of the calls. No voicemails or text messages were left, and the 911 service also didn't receive any calls from that number that night. The photos and videos posted by the young people confirmed that they were indeed at the lighthouse. As a result, the police immediately dispatched 20 different Coast Guard units to the area. The Coast Guard, firefighters, and police conducted searches by air, sea, and land. The first discovery made by the police was Sophia's car, parked on the university campus. Inside the car, they also found her cell phone. Meanwhile, on the same night, the Coast Guard discovered a T-shirt which Spencer had been wearing in the video. The police theorized that Spencer might have used it to secure the boat to the shore. The search continued throughout the night and the following day. Soon, a storm began, and state authorities announced the suspension of the search for the young people until new leads or signs of their possible whereabouts emerged. This decision deeply shocked their families and friends, but they continued their own search efforts, hanging pictures and spreading information about Spencer and Sophia's disappearance throughout the city. They appealed to the public to report any available information. However, despite the large number of people on the streets at the time of the young people's disappearance, no witnesses came forward. The family's searches continued for several days, but all questions remained unanswered. What happened? Why did Sophia repeatedly call her mother? Why didn't she leave a voicemail or call the police? There were many speculations and assumptions. Could they have consumed something illicit? Indeed, they had broken the law by stealing a boat from the campus and heading to the lighthouse without permission. It's likely Sophia feared they could be held accountable, and thus chose not to contact the police, as a few days prior, she and Spencer had already had legal issues. Spencer had been detained for driving under the influence, and Sophia had faced charges for aggressive behavior. Perhaps for this reason, she preferred to contact her mother rather than the police. However, it's unknown what other circumstances were present in Sophia's life at that moment. She might have been in a state of panic and unable to think clearly. Everyone's reaction to such situations can be unpredictable. Meanwhile, detectives tried to reconstruct the events of that day. May 26, 2018, began as a typical day. It was sunny and warm, with the upcoming weekend promising plenty of fun. The city was gearing up for Memorial Day celebrations, a national holiday. Sophia had the day off, but Spencer was scheduled to cover a shift for a colleague from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Afterwards, the young couple planned to meet up and join the city's festivities. Sophia and Spencer intended to spend the rest of the day together, including a visit to the mysterious lighthouse, famous for its paranormal phenomena, which they were eager to experience for themselves. The details of what happened after Spencer's shift ended remain unknown. It's unclear where they went or if they met anyone, and there's no information about whether they had been drinking. However, it was established that Sophia parked her car at the University of Connecticut campus around 2 a.m. For some reason, she left her cell phone in the car. Perhaps she forgot it, or it was out of charge, and she decided not to take it. The pair then illegally took a sailboat without a mast or engine, weighing 14 pounds and equipped only with oars. They pushed it into the water and set off towards the lighthouse, navigating by the rocky shores. Clearly it was unsafe, considering the lack of safety equipment in the boat. Likely they were not afraid to embark on this journey due to Spencer's confidence in his aquatic skills. He had been a proficient swimmer and boat handler since childhood. That's all the investigators managed to gather about the events of that night. On Monday evening, while scanning the surroundings from a search helicopter, the police discovered a white and blue sailboat stuck in the rocks, covered with a layer of dust. The vessel was located 12 kilometers west of the lighthouse. According to police reports, this was likely the same boat that went missing from the campus and might have been used by Spencer and Sophia, although this was not conclusively established. Fingerprints were found on the boat, but they were never analyzed or the results made public to determine if they matched the fingerprints of the young couple. There were also discrepancies regarding the type of vessel used. Initially, it was reported as a kayak, but later information suggested it was a white sailboat with a red inscription. In their search for clues, investigators thoroughly examined the backgrounds of Sophia McKenna and Spencer Mugford. Sophia McKenna was born on March 7, 1996, in North Stonington, Connecticut. At the time of the incident, she was 21 years old and lived in Groton, Connecticut, USA. She was the daughter of Michelle from her first marriage and grew up with her brother Justin and younger sister Grace. Sophia was very caring towards her siblings, whom she dearly loved. As a child, Sophia was happy and intelligent, displaying unique qualities. She was active, full of energy, and always led a vibrant and fulfilling life. However, her life was deeply impacted by her parents' divorce when she was around 7 years old, leaving a profound psychological scar. During her high school years, Sophia was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which caused her depression. This mental illness is characterized by drastic mood swings, including manic episodes or hypomania. Sophia experienced emotional lows, such as depression with sadness and melancholy, alternating with manic episodes of euphoria. These mood swings could affect her behavior and clarity of thought. Sophia received treatment, including medication and psychotherapy to manage symptoms. However, there is no cure for bipolar disorder. It presents a challenge for both the patient and their family. The illness significantly impacted Sophia's daily life. Her behavior became unpredictable and her life was chaotic. She had unstable relationships, and the people she interacted with often displayed complex behavior. In 2015, Sophia met Austin. Bright and cheerful, she immediately captured the young man's heart. He pursued the attractive Sophia beautifully and persistently, and they soon started a relationship that lasted 3 years. However, this relationship was rather unpleasant for both Sophia and her mother, Michelle. Austin was a problematic young man, somewhat aggressive, and used anabolic steroids for sports, making their relationship quite unstable. The young couple often argued and yelled at each other, even to the point of physical altercations. Due to her mental health issues, Sophia was typically the instigator of these conflicts. On several occasions, Austin's aggressive outbursts led to injuries to Sophia, requiring hospital visits. About a month before the incident, Sophia discovered Austin's infidelity and decided to end the relationship. However, they continued to see each other sporadically. Despite her struggles, Sophia tried to move forward. She was a very attractive young woman and briefly became a model for a local company, advertising their jeans. This helped her finance her education. She eventually graduated as a massage therapist and found employment at an exclusive spa called The Red Door in a luxurious hotel. It was here that she met Spencer Mugford, her 20-year-old colleague. Spencer, originally from Florida, was a sea enthusiast and an experienced swimmer, working as a sailing instructor. He came from a loving family who had high hopes for his future. Spencer and Sophia quickly bonded over shared interests and similar wavelengths. They reportedly dated for some time, but neither of their families approved, as the young couple was frequently surrounded by trouble. According to Michelle, Sophia's mother, she was deeply concerned about Sophia's well-being, especially since Sophia and Austin continued to meet and often consumed alcohol, which had become almost a daily occurrence. Ultimately, Sophia's relationship with Spencer did not last, and they decided to remain friends. The exact reason for this remains unclear, though it appears Sophia might have returned to her ex-boyfriend, Austin. Despite this, Sophia and Spencer continued to spend a lot of time together, both at work and outside of it, including on their last day. After several days of searching, when fishermen discovered Spencer's body, his family wrote an obituary in the local media. Sophia's family did the same, but they continued to hold out hope and kept searching. They repeatedly tried to recall the events leading up to the disappearance, attempting to figure out what the young people did that evening and whether they met anyone on their last day. However, no new information emerged. It was unclear if there were any other calls besides the ones to Michelle's number from Spencer's phone, as his mobile was never found, and the police did not provide cell operator records. Cameras at the lighthouse and the campus were reportedly not working, so there were no video recordings of that night's events. It was also revealed that the lighthouse was never checked, even though it should have been done by the authorities immediately after the couple's disappearance. In July 2018, Sophia McKenna's close relatives created a Facebook page titled Searching for Sophia McKenna to keep the case alive in public memory. The page served as a platform for sharing information, brochures, and pleas for any information from the public. Weeks after the disappearance, a strange incident occurred. Michelle received a message from Sophia's social media account requesting money. Since the police were in possession of Sophia's phone, this message raised suspicions, suggesting a possible hacker's involvement. The investigation into Spencer's death and Sophia's disappearance hit a dead end. The police provided no conclusive findings. Unofficially, several theories about the incident circulated. One theory involved Austin, Sophia's ex-boyfriend, and his possible involvement in the young couple's disappearance. Some speculated that Austin might have attacked Sophia, and his friends helped him dispose of Spencer. Their tumultuous relationship, known for frequent arguments and physical altercations, was a matter of public discussion. Michelle, Sophia's mother, witnessed several of their disputes. A month before the disappearance, serious issues arose when Sophia learned of Austin's infidelity on May 8, 2018, and ended the relationship. In what could have been an act of revenge or a new start, Sophia dated another guy, bringing him to her apartment. Austin, infuriated, rushed to her apartment, where neighbors witnessed him furiously banging and kicking the door, hurling insults at Sophia. After about 15 minutes of silence, thinking Austin had left, Sophia opened the door. However, Austin was still there, attempting to push Sophia and enter the apartment. Fortunately, Sophia managed to close the door quickly. Neighbors heard his threats to cut her throat if she didn't open the door. By then, police and Michelle had arrived, and Austin was arrested. The next day, May 9th, a court order became effective. In her statement, Sophia mentioned previous attacks by Austin and provided photos of her injuries. She expressed fear for her life due to his stalking. A restraining order prohibited Austin from being in the same area as Sophia. However, Sophia later felt guilty, and the restrictions were revised. Now, Austin was only prohibited from being in the same apartment as her. The man with Sophia at the time refused to disclose his identity and did not cooperate with the police. Initially, Michelle claimed it was Spencer with Sophia, but later changed her statement. However, a colleague Sophia trusted revealed that it was indeed him. Sophia and Spencer's colleagues confirmed that the two were in a relationship at the time of their disappearance, acting like a couple both at work and outside. Witnesses also recounted an incident at the hotel where Austin, Sophia's ex, showed up at her workplace and publicly threatened her. Nevertheless, Austin and his father participated in the search for the missing couple using a private helicopter and distributed flyers with their images throughout the city. Austin posted on social media, asserting that Sophia was his girlfriend for 3 years and that she had no romantic relationship with Spencer, just friendship. This post, seemingly emphasizing Sophia's association with him rather than her disappearance, appeared odd to many. On July 10th, a memorial day for Sophia was organized by her family and friends. Austin attended the event with Michelle and later posted a now-deleted message on social media. "Rest in peace, baby. We'll see each other soon." These actions raised eyebrows among acquaintances. Austin claimed to authorities that he spent the entire day with Sophia on May 26th and that they continued to meet despite the court order, even making plans for the next day. A friend of Austin stated that around 3 a.m. on the night of the incident, Austin texted Sophia claiming to be at the gym with a friend. However, this was doubtful as gyms are closed at that hour. His family maintained he was home before heading to the gym. An undisclosed witness reported that Austin and his brother were invited to a party that day. Austin initially intended to go, but later messaged saying he was tired and wouldn't attend. This raises questions about Austin's whereabouts when Sophia and Spencer disappeared, with no clear answers available. Austin's acquaintances describe him as temperamental, possibly exacerbated by steroid use. There were rumors of Austin, his brother, and a friend having connections with the Groton police. Also, a woman from Austin's family was allegedly married to the police chief, who was investigating Sophia's case and had complaints of police violence against him. However, the reliability of these claims, provided by Austin's friend with a criminal past, is questionable. The day after a YouTube channel dedicated to Long Island disappearances posted a video about Sophia, Austin removed all photos of them together from his social media. This action caused confusion, especially since Sophia's fate was still uncertain. One theory is that Austin had found a new girlfriend and wanted to avoid complications. However, the complete removal of all photos with Sophia seemed unusual. Furthermore, just days after Sophia's disappearance, Austin's involvement in the search noticeably waned. When he met with investigators, he appeared calm and composed, not visibly distressed by the loss of someone close. However, this is insufficient for any accusations against Austin. People react differently to stress. One theory suggests Sophia was killed to prevent her from testifying against Austin in a domestic violence case. Without her testimony, there wouldn't have been enough evidence, and the case could have been dismissed. This is exactly what happened in the summer of 2018 when the case against Austin was dropped. It's important to note that Austin is not officially a suspect. This theory remains speculative, and the investigation continues. Another version speculates that Sophia and Spencer may have encountered dangerous individuals at the lighthouse. It was a busy day due to the holiday, but witnesses either didn't remember them or didn't find the information significant as no one reported to the police. Sophia's mother theorized her daughter might have been kidnapped or fallen victim to human trafficking, but there's no evidence or ransom demands to support this. The police also considered the possibility of an accident due to reckless actions and decisions. The young couple set out in an unprepared boat without life jackets into strong currents. Once at the lighthouse, they moored the boat with Spencer's t-shirt. They took photos and then realized the boat had drifted away. Relying on his swimming experience, Spencer may have underestimated the water's low temperature. The darkness, which often distorts distance perception, could have made him think the boat was closer. Physically tired from his workday and the swim to the lighthouse, Spencer might have drowned. Realizing she couldn't see or hear Spencer, Sophia tried calling her mother for help. In desperation, she might have jumped in to assist Spencer and drowned as well. Sophia wasn't a strong swimmer, making it unlikely she'd jump into such conditions. However, under the influence of alcohol, she might have made an irrational decision. It's also possible she was walking on the lighthouse's narrow ledge, trying to spot Spencer, stumbled and fell with her phone, then got swept away by the current and drowned. These theories remain relevant, though others exist too. None is the official version, and they lack suspects or culprits, circulating mainly on social media. Sophia's family and friends continue to search for her, desperate to uncover what happened and where she is. In 2019, an independent detective found several bones near the shore and immediately reported it to the police. However, the investigators who arrived at the scene deemed the bones to be of animal origin. The remains were never collected, and due to the high cost, no forensic examination was conducted to determine if they were human. There are many aspects of this case that raise suspicions and warrant a thorough investigation. After all, this is about a missing person with a family in anguish, seeking answers. Sophia undoubtedly deserves continued search efforts. Numerous bodies of other missing individuals have been discovered in these waters, but not Sophia's. No new information has surfaced in her case, and the mystery of what happened that night at the lighthouse remains unsolved. In most cases, addiction is not a sentence, and many former alcoholics, for example, overcome their addiction, return to normal life, build families, and help others with similar problems to overcome the crisis. This is how the story of a young woman named Nicole Pittz began, who seemed to have a whole bright life ahead of her. The investigation in this difficult case lasted 6 years before the main suspect in the murder was in the dock, and another year it took to prove in court his guilt and send the criminal to prison for as long as possible. At first glance, this crime seemed perfectly planned and thought out down to the last detail, and the criminal himself for many years believed in his impunity and lived a full life, believing that he would never be brought to justice. But it was the little things and details, which the investigation for years collected in bits and pieces, helped to put the puzzle together. And now, let's try to make sense of this convoluted story from the beginning. Who is Nicole Pittz? Nicole Pittz was born in King County, Washington in 1973, on February 26th. She was the only common child of her parents, whose marriage broke up when the girl was still in high school. Nicole grew up an active and sociable child, played sports, and was considered a real charmer. She always had a lot of friends. She loved trips out of town to the countryside, and the favorite place of rest of the girl was Lake Sammamish. located east of Seattle, where she was every year during the summer vacations. After graduating from high school, the girl went to Western Washington College, where she studied public relations. In parallel, Nicole continued to actively participate in sports, was in excellent physical shape, and decided to turn her hobby into a source of profit. She got a job as a trainer at a local sports club, where she quickly gained the respect of her colleagues and also gained regular clients who willingly attended group classes, where Nicole was an instructor. In parallel, Pittz decided to get a higher education in the field of management, and after she got a job in a large mobile communications company. Outwardly, she was always friendly, sociable, and ready to help at any moment, but almost no one even guessed how much pain and misery was hidden behind a screen of apparent well-being, harmful addiction. As a teenager, Nicole experienced a serious crisis when her parents divorced. For a fragile yet to the end of the unformed psyche, it was a great shock, and rebellious character and bad company turned out that Nicole began to hide from problems, whoring them with alcohol. All this led to a serious addiction that lasted several years and thoroughly undermined Nicole's physical and mental health. At that time, Nicole's mother Gail worked as a stewardess and was almost constantly absent from home because of her busy work schedule, so she did not notice in time that something wrong was happening to her only daughter. The girl lived with an elderly grandmother, who also did not immediately realize that her granddaughter regularly consumes alcohol. When the truth was revealed, alcohol addiction has already managed to do irreparable damage. To cope with the problem, Nicole was helped by her mother Gail, with whom they have always been very close, despite everything. She not only sent her daughter to therapy, but also attended AA meetings with her, helping her to open up and overcome her cravings for alcohol. By then, Gail had remarried, and her new boyfriend Rod was sympathetic. He supported her stepdaughter in every way possible, loved her like his own daughter, and believed that she could overcome her addiction. Nicole approached therapy responsibly, did not miss a single meeting, and quickly enough was able to overcome her addiction. However, as I said, alcohol took a toll on Nicole's health. She developed serious problems with her pancreas, so much so that she had to undergo surgery. But the worst thing, alcohol abuse at such a young age violated the reproductive functions of the body, so that Pittz could not have children. In the mid-90s, when Nicole overcame addiction and returned to a sober life, she met her future spouse, whose name was David. At that time, she just got a job at a sports club, and David was his regular visitor, Nicole. In turn, he also paid attention to the attractive coach and began to show interest in her. True, David was 4 years younger than Nicole, but the age difference did not embarrass them. Soon between them began a romantic relationship that lasted almost 8 years, and only in 2002 the couple married. They arranged a beautiful but modest wedding ceremony in Hawaii, to which were invited only the closest people to them. After the wedding, the newlyweds settled in the quiet town of Linwood, in Washington state, where they bought their own house and gradually settled down. Nicole was a very sociable and friendly young woman. She quickly made friends, and she also developed good relationships with all the neighbors. She simply adored animals and had several dogs. Since she could not have children, she gave all her unspent maternal love to her pets. According to neighbors' memories, David and Nicole looked like the perfect married couple. They were practically inseparable, often walking their dogs together and just glowing with happiness. Nicole loved to cook, and she was very good at it. She pampered a delicious home-cooked food spouse and also liked to surprise the guests who came to their house with her culinary skills. In 2006, just a few days before her 33rd birthday, Nicole mysteriously disappeared. On that day, for the first time, she did not come to the meeting of the AA Society, where she was the leader and inspirer of the group. Since this had never happened before, the other members of the group thought she had snapped after almost 9 years of sobriety. Pittz also didn't show up for work that day, which worried her co-workers, and in the evening the alarm was sounded by Gail, who couldn't contact her daughter all day, which had never happened before. She called David to find out what had happened, but her son-in-law replied that he couldn't reach his spouse either. According to her husband, he and Nicole had had a bit of a fight the day before, so when he tried to call her the next day and she didn't answer the phone, He assumed that Nicole was still mad at him. It was for this reason that David didn't start looking for her right away, but waited until the evening to ask his wife for forgiveness. When in the evening Nicole did not come home and her phone was still unanswered, the family decided to go to the police, but there their application was not immediately accepted. The missing person was an adult, and not even a day had passed since her disappearance, so the police said that there was no cause for concern. For this reason, the search was not started until the evening of the second day, because Nicole never showed up and her phone was unavailable. The police decided to start the search from the place where Nicole was last seen, namely from her and David's house. However, no clues or anything unusual could be found there that would indicate that Pittz had been kidnapped or something had been done to her in that very room. In addition, Pittz was missing along with her personal automobile, which suggested that she had simply left and decided not to return. From here arose the first version, according to which the young woman, after a family quarrel with her husband, simply decided to leave him or teach him a lesson, making him worry. The second version was voiced by Nicole's friends from a support group for people with alcohol addiction. In their opinion, Nicole could have snapped after years of abstinence and sobriety. In favor of this hypothesis was the fact that recently she had been taking strong painkillers, which she was prescribed because of a back injury and her pain. Nicole often exceeded her prescribed dosage and at some point may have switched from medication to alcohol. The third version was the worst of all possible options. Nicole did not return and did not give any news about herself because she was no longer alive. However, the family members of the missing person, to the end, refused to believe it and hoped for the best. Her mother and stepfather did not wait for the police to wait for the necessary time and began the search themselves. They appealed to all concerned people through social networks with a request to help in the search and share any relevant information about the location of their daughter. They also took the first flight to Ulan-Ude, where they began searching for their daughter on their own, putting up flyers with her photos and asking people who knew her personally. The police searched not only for Nicole, but also for her car, while trying to establish which route it had traveled on that fateful day. But the longer the search lasted, the faster the hope of finding Nicole alive had faded. The worst assumptions came true a few days later, when in one of the local park areas, a man going for a morning jog came across the body of a young woman. That day, he decided to take a shortcut through an unpopular and neglected area rather than his usual route. There he noticed something strange in the shrubbery, and coming closer he realized that it was a badly mutilated naked female body. Information about the terrible find was immediately transferred to the police, and the criminalists who arrived on the scene suggested that the crime may have involved violence, because the body of a young woman had no clothes. There was no doubt that it was a murder, and judging by the number of bruises, abrasions, and bruises, the victim had been severely beaten beforehand. The cause of death was asphyxiation. Nicole was strangled with her bare hands. It was a truly gruesome picture. As the car of the victim was still not found, investigators assumed that the main motive of the crime was theft. But the attacker decided to eliminate a witness, and since it was a young woman, she may also have been abused. The police immediately assumed that the body found belonged to Nicole Pittz, who had disappeared a few days ago and was being searched for all over the city, but she had yet to be identified by her family. When Gail saw her daughter's body in the morgue, she lost her senses. The mother needed medical help. Her husband Rod was also out of grief, but the reaction of the widowed spouse, many seemed a little strange. David did not look depressed at all, and his emotions were somewhat faked. However, then no one paid much attention to it because everyone experiences tragedy in his own way. While the search for the vehicle was underway, the police still believed that the car was the main target of the attacker, and the traces of the killer should be sought inside the car. Information about the missing car was placed in the media with a request to anyone who sees the car to immediately report it to the hotline. The car was found only a couple of weeks later in one of the parking lots on the outskirts of the city. The unremarkable gray Volkswagen Polo was noticed by the guard on duty because the car had not been taken away for a long time, but the guard had no idea that it was involved in a murder case. The police immediately took the car for detailed examination and necessary expertise. It was assumed that it was here that they would be able to find evidence and important clues that would help to trace the criminal, as well as to restore the picture of the crime. However, the investigators were completely disappointed. In the car could not be found exactly nothing. There was no blood, traces of struggle, or signs that the car owner was taken somewhere by force. In the cabin, there were fingerprints and traces of DNA only Nicole herself, as well as her husband, who also occasionally used the vehicle. Nevertheless, the investigators were not in a hurry to return the car to David because they felt that the evidence is there. They just do not lie on the surface. The irrefutable fact remained only that the young woman was killed with particular cruelty, but the motive of the crime was completely unclear. The hijacking version now seemed untenable because the car was abandoned almost immediately on the other side of the city, and there were no signs of struggle inside it. The second obvious motive was violence, but this assumption was not confirmed. Experts found that the deceased, at least a day before the crime, had no sexual contacts, neither voluntary nor forced. But in this case, the question remained open as to why she had no clothes on. The third version was some personal motive or acute, unpleasant feelings of the perpetrator towards the victim. In favor of this assumption spoke numerous injuries, inflicted as if in a fit of rage. However, the kind and sociable Nicole, eager to help everyone around her, had no enemies or ill-wishers. This difficult case had all chances to remain unsolved, because after almost a year, the investigation has no new leads or directions for the search for the criminal. No one saw the code, and who abandoned the car in the parking lot, because the place itself was not crowded, and there were no surveillance cameras in the area. But what was strange was that the person driving the car was much taller and larger than the victim, as evidenced by the position of the driver's seat. Suspicious was also the fact that the case was assigned the status of secrecy and information about the course of the investigation, as well as about new facts and found evidence was not disclosed even to the relatives of the victim. That is, the mother, stepfather, and husband, in fact, were in the dark. They received only fragmentary information, for example, that Nicole's bank card was used at a certain gas station in the country after her disappearance. The police requested the footage from the video cameras there, but what they saw on them remained a mystery. Nicole's parents, despairing that there were no results and their daughter's killer was still at large, decided to conduct an independent investigation on their own. To do this, they hired a private detective to gather all the information and verify some of their guesses, and announced a reward of $10,000 for those who provide any useful information on the subject. The reward was later increased to $35,000, but it still didn't help move the case forward. David only showed interest in the investigation for the first 6 months, but after that he gradually withdrew, stopped communicating with his mother-in-law and father-in-law, and soon remarried and had an heir. For Gail, this news was a heavy blow because her daughter could not have children, and David constantly reproached his wife for this. The grief-stricken mother repeatedly suggested that the culprit could be her son-in-law, but many believed that in her speaks resentment, and the police seemed not to consider such a version at all. An unexpected twist in the case. It wasn't until 6 years after the crime that it was revealed that David had been taken into custody as the prime suspect in the case. For most people who followed the investigation, such a turn was a complete surprise, but not for Nicole's family and friends, who from the beginning suspected him and openly talked about it. During the long years of investigation, they seemed disappointed in justice, but now justice had been served. David himself, who by that time had changed his place of residence and stopped contact with his first wife's family, was discouraged when the handcuffs were snapped on his wrists because he thought that the case had long been closed and no one was looking for the criminal. He categorically denied his guilt and even agreed to take a lie detector test, which he failed miserably. As it turned out, the police also from the beginning suspected David, but no hard evidence proving his guilt. They had no, and to scare the criminal and make him hide, they did not want to. So all these years, the investigators were busy with the fact that the pieces of evidence to collect, so that the culprit was deserved punishment. David himself probably thought he had committed the perfect crime and no one would ever get on his trail. However, the crime had a number of oddities, each of which had to be checked. Let's start, perhaps, with the surveillance footage at the same gas station, where someone paid with the card of the dead Nicole. The footage clearly showed that the card was used by a man who looked very much like David, but it was impossible to identify him clearly because of the presence of a headdress and dark glasses. Despite the fact that this recording could not be considered as incontrovertible evidence, it was still included in the case file. The second oddity was the absence of Nicole's wedding ring, without which she never left the house. At first, everyone thought that the jewelry was stolen by a criminal, but during the search in the victim's house, the ring was found in a box on the dressing table. In addition, experts criminalists, during the examination of the body, found in Nicole's mouth a special dental mouth guard, which she used during sleep to prevent bruxism, teeth grinding. Nicole had been prescribed this device shortly before the tragedy because she was experiencing uncontrollable spasms of her masticatory muscles due to nervousness, which in turn led to the erosion of enamel and chipping of teeth. This finding led the investigation to believe that the victim had been killed in her own bed while she was still asleep. This explained the lack of clothing on her, and the fact that the body was completely clean, and there were no signs of resistance. There was also no trace of makeup on Nicole's face, which she always carefully applied before leaving the house. About the mouthguard, by the way, David could simply forget, because his wife began to use it recently. In addition, experts have studied in detail and assessed the position of the driver's seat in the found car, finding that the anthropometric data of the last person who sat behind the wheel coincide with the data of the spouse of the murdered. In addition, in the car, as already mentioned, found fingerprints only David and Nicole. If a third person had been in the cabin, there would have been found his traces, and if he erased them, then erased traces and prints of the owners of the car. And one more important discovery was made thanks to the rapid development of technology. The perpetrator, after his crime, in an attempt to confuse the investigation, several times used the victim's phone in different parts of the city, but in the same places, and at the same time there was a signal from David's phone. As it turned out, David also had a motive, and in this perfect-looking family, a serious crisis was long overdue. While Nicole was studying hard, working 2 jobs, and helping people cope with their addiction, her husband led an idle lifestyle. He never held down a job for long, liked to spend time in bars and clubs where he spent his wife's earnings on booze and other women. Nicole always responded with an emphatic refusal, and once her husband tried to get her drunk to force her to do it. Gail knew about all the horrors that were going on in her daughter's family and tried to convince her to leave her husband, but she did not want to do it because she loved him and hoped that David would change. And after Nicole's mysterious death, her husband rushed to get a large insurance payment and immediately started a new affair. As it turned out, a few months before the tragedy, David, who had not been faithful before, had an affair with a girl named Jane. He spent time with her in bars and clubs while his wife was busy working or studying. Shortly before Nicole's birthday, he brought his mistress straight home, where they were caught by the suddenly returned Nicole. It was this circumstance that became the cause of that very family quarrel. Nicole told her mother about the incident, with whom she was very close, and a couple of days later she mysteriously disappeared. Since Gail was aware of everything that was going on, she suspected her son-in-law from the beginning. However, the police insisted that the evidence gathered was too little to send the suspect to jail. Then the case was classified, and the family stopped receiving any information about the investigation, and over the years, the parents lost all hope that the culprit will be punished. By the way, when David received an impressive insurance payout after his wife's death, he spent that money with Jane. Gail suggested that David's mistress could be an accomplice or inspirer of the crime, but she was only brought in as a witness because no evidence proving her involvement was found during the investigation. David appeared before the court in September 2013, but he continued to categorically deny his involvement in the tragedy. His defense lawyers initially insisted that all the evidence against their client was circumstantial and could not unequivocally prove his guilt. When it became apparent that there were too many incriminating factors, the defense changed tactics, trying to make David look like a victim. The story of pain pills that Nicole took after her back injury was brought up, and the lawyers also tried to convince the court that Nicole snapped and started drinking alcohol again, making her husband's life unbearable. But first, such claims were baseless, and everyone who knew Nicole confirmed this. And secondly, even if she had snapped, it would not have given David any right to kill his wife, and even with such cruelty. The guilt of the defendant was eventually fully proven, and for his crime he received the maximum possible sentence provided by the laws of the state in which the case was heard. David went to prison for 18 years. However, in 2025 he can count on parole after serving 2/3 of his sentence.